welcome everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to have you join us for our first conference of the year. We will be talking about being prepared for death and dying. Now, it sounds like a very macabre subject, and it is, but actually it's much more stressful if you're not prepared for rather than being actually prepared for it. So this is what this conference is all about. So I'm delighted to bring to you some fantastic speakers. So we will be joined by Heledd Wyn, Janet SHREEVE, Lisa McLean, and Ali Dickinson. And I've got to say with Ali, if you can just stay with us to the end, I'm so glad to have her on because she was last minute addition to the panel, and end of life doula. I don't know if you've ever heard of one, but I'm really excited to bring that new role to you. And we're blessed with such a fantastic panel of speakers. Heledd will be talking to us from a legal perspective of what to prepare for, what to think about. Janet is going to be talking about her services and living care, and also how she supported people in the process. Lisa is going to be talking about writing wills and some other planning that people can think about. And really, the whole reason why I wanted to bring this conference to everyone is sort of personal, sort of professional, but I've had a lot of people pass in my life, and one of the things that I really wanted to do during that process was be present with them and not have to be bogged down in the paperwork and the stress of it all and who's making decisions and what does my loved one want. And I feel that sometimes people are blindsided by this. They don't want to talk about it. Some people are very old-fashioned and think, well, if I start talking about it and preparing, then I'm going to die. But no, that's not the case. So really what we're trying to do is help people to plan so they can be present with their loved ones, so you don't have to be so stressed. And whilst they've got capacity and you're not even thinking about death or dying, you are being well informed about what your options are, where you can go, how you can think about things and prepare for the eventuality, the inevitable eventuality. And it does work a little bit twofold. So you will have things that you'll learn today that you will be able to share with others in your personal life, but also you'll be able to look at things professionally from a healthcare point of view. So a lot of our network works in care homes and supports people, and we're really there to support people towards their end of life. So I think it's very important that we understand some of the things that are open to people. And if you see a family struggling, or so maybe you build this into your care plans about what mechanisms they have planned for, and if they haven't had anything planned, whether it's LPAs, whether it's advanced decisions, future wishes, then where can you signpost people? How can you support them in getting prepared and making the whole transition to end of life much easier for them and also for you? So that is the backstory around what we're trying to do today. A few housekeeping points. So this is obviously one of the many conferences we hope to hold this year. We will be in a few weeks, hopefully, just need to get it CPD accredited, doing a conference around neurodiversity. So the focus of that one will be not only as somebody who needs support in the workplace, but also as somebody who is employing people who might be neurodivergent, and what you can do as an employer. Now, I think sometimes, or years ago, or before this was more talked about, people would maybe bury their heads in the sand and hope people would just get on and be fine. But now there's so much more we can do. I've spoken to some fantastic people who understand and can coach employers about how to support people in their workforce. And of course, working in social care, you may already be supporting people with different with needs like autism, learning disability, and even mental health needs. But we're going to focus on neurodiversity in this conference, and hopefully we'll do some more conferences like that in the future. So how do you get to know about that? The best thing you can do is, and hopefully we'll put this in the chat, sign up to our newsletter. We send out information to our mailing list on a regular basis, and when we've got the date locked down, we will be sharing that with you. So sign up to our newsletter and you'll find out everything that Co-Produced Care is doing through that. You can also, most of our things are actually streamed on YouTube, so you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where you'll be watching us today, most likely, or on LinkedIn, but mostly on YouTube. So just stay in touch with us. There's a lot coming up. I've also got an ask. We are looking to develop some new things, including a newsletter, and I would really, really appreciate just a small group of people who work in social care to actually be on an advisory panel to help us develop something that's useful to people who work in the sector. We've already got a draft going. We hope to launch it in March, but if you're interested in being on that advisory group and also getting access to free membership when we launch that, then please do email us. So we'll put all of that in the chat and also in the description of wherever you're watching this conference. So we have had quite a few people sign up, and I know people will be watching back, but it's really important subject we're talking about today. So I would be grateful if you could share the link. You can just copy and paste into maybe one of your WhatsApp groups or to a colleague, and try to get everyone who you think might be interested in preparing for death and dying onto this talk today. So I am going to introduce our first speaker in a moment, but last ask, just to like and subscribe if you can to wherever you're watching us. The likes go a long way because it makes us know, it helps us to understand whether you're enjoying the conference, whether the subject matter is right, and also just keep your comments coming in the chat. As we go along, you'll have thoughts, you'll have questions about what the speakers are talking about. So your best bet is to pop those thoughts into the comment section wherever you're watching us as they come along, and we're going to have a Q&A after each speaker to help answer those questions. So use the chat as much as you can. Give us a thumbs up, a like wherever you're watching us, and then we'll just carry on doing more of the same. We do this all pro bono, so do our speakers. So we just are really grateful if people can tune in and support us. So I'll just go through the agenda for you so you know roughly what we're going to be doing today. I'll be introducing our first speaker shortly, and then we're going to have 4 fantastic talks. We will have a break around 12, and I am going to try and share with you some chair yoga. So stay tuned for that. But otherwise, if you miss something, if you have to take a call, don't worry, you can just rewind and you can go back and watch it again. So this whole platform is really flexible. So I am going to introduce our first speaker. Hello, Heledd. How are you today?
Hello, how are you? I'm very well. I'm very excited to be here. What a fantastic sort of selection of things you got talking about today.
Yes, we absolutely have. And I'm just going to pop up a little overlay, we call it, about you, just so people can see. I know you're going to introduce yourself properly in a moment. The writing's a bit small, but from Rothley Law, and I know, Heledd, we have spoken so many times over the years, and I see you on social media. I see you on LinkedIn, and you've got about 100,000 followers. It's ridiculous. And that's because you are so good at what you do, and you really get out there and you support people, and you've advised me before with parents and what to do, what to prepare for, so really appreciate you spending the time to come along today. So I won't introduce you too much. I'll let you introduce yourself for a moment, and I'll just pull up your slides. So yeah, if you could just tell us where you're working at the moment and your journey into the area of work that you're focusing on at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. And whilst I have got slides that are being very kindly presented, I'm not going to sort of read them out to you. They are intended for afterwards. If you want to have a go back and have a look and have a bit of a think about what's been said, then that's fine. So it's not going to be hopefully too onerous. So yeah, I'm a solicitor. I have worked I'm 20 years qualified this year, I worked out, which is nice. And my role is working with people and their circumstances and their families. And families are complicated, aren't they? And individuals are complicated, and everybody's got an opinion. And it's sometimes trying to break through that. And as a solicitor, my job is to apply the law. So, there will be sort of talking about that. And really, it's about working consultatively and complementing other services. So, I'm a solicitor, but I might often work with social workers, or I might work with mental capacity assessors, care home providers, parents, children, siblings, the whole gamut of people who finding themselves navigating what can be quite a difficult set of circumstances. So, first and foremost, I think, I work within the sphere of planning and crisis management. Planning comes down to the sort of issues about what can we do ahead of time? What do we know might be coming down the line as to issues for yourselves, for your parents, for children, or often all three, and sometimes 4 generations. So it's having conversations, understanding it. And if I sit there and go, let's talk about doing wills and powers of attorney, you're probably going to sit there and go, yeah, that's nice, but it's not for me. It's not for now. I'm not ill. I'm not unwell. I don't want to, as Sophie says, I don't want to think about what's coming down the line, because I think I find that too hard. And what I want to talk about is actually, it's as the title of this event is, prepared, not scared. My job and my role is to try and navigate what can be really difficult conversations. And because I don't have the sort of emotional involvement that a lot of family members do, I can hopefully sit there and go, okay, well, look, you're telling me all these things. I'm telling you we're going to put in place building blocks as to what we might or might not be able to do to make things easier down the line. So I mentioned wills. Wills deal with money. Wills deal with money and where your money goes when you've died. That ultimately is all it's about. Powers of attorney, what happens when you're alive? That can be more important for people. That can be something that people find much more difficult to talk about, because it's quite hard. Nobody wants to get ill. Nobody wants to see a loved one get ill. But what do you do when that happens? And unfortunately, when people do get ill or frail, or perhaps have never had the independence because there's been say an injury at birth, or you've got somebody who's got learning difficulties or learning disabilities, you will find yourself coming up against the system. And the system is often healthcare, social care, legal requirements, legal obligations, and this can be pretty hard to navigate, because why would you need to know unless you're sort of in the middle of it? And it's incredibly hard at times for people to understand what their rights are. So my hope and expectation is that by giving you a bit of a toolkit and knowing, when there might be things you can do or could do, or being prepared, and knowing some of the language, knowing some of the concepts can be incredibly useful. So
great. So I'm just going to stop you there, because I do have the slides. Would you like
marvellous.
me to share them now? Are you ready for them?
Yes, please. That'd be lovely.
Get the frog out your throat first. Right. Okay, let's go and do that. There we go. Okay, here we are.
There you go. Lovely. Thank you. So yeah, that's me. As I said, these are lots of the areas I sort of cover off. And they're quite big in and of themselves. So Sophie, are you driving the slides? Yes, perfect. So
yeah,
clients, I think I work with people. So this is a kind of a normal sort of scenario that I might have. You might have, you know, Big Tom, who's our sort of patriarch. It could be a matriarch. He's got his wife, he's got his kids. One of them's working in the business with him, and one's got, you know, she's quite young, but we know she's got possibly learning difficulties, learning disabilities, or issues, and navigating that sort of experience is pretty important. So, next slide, please. Often what happens, the conversations I start is this, which I was kindly gifted as a slide by a doctor. And if we look at the top left-hand corner, we see sort of the idea of there's those of us who are well or independent. Something might happen to us where you might have break your leg or have an illness, but it's quite a temporary time out from your life, whereas you might be, well, you know, you might be on crutches for 6 weeks or so, but you normally then you can get back to normal. The bottom right hand corner is the area where things get more tricky, whereas you've got somebody who's perhaps struggling already, whether that's on this one, it's a frailty thing, where you've got somebody who's just about managing, and then something happens. They break a leg, they have a stroke, and that drop is quite significant to the fact where people are losing independence. And whilst they might rally, they never get back to that sort of above the line independence again. And it's that space where families can find themselves navigating quite difficult conversations, both with the individual and care providers, etc. So have the next slide, please. As I say, you know, these are some of the things in the toolkits. You know, are there wills for when somebody's died? Where does the money go? Who's responsible for that? Because that can be quite a big deal if you've got somebody who's left behind who's financially reliant on the person who's just died, making sure that that's all in place. Powers of attorney, there's 2 types. There's one for finance and there's one for health. And that means you can delegate decision making to people to make those decisions for you if you get to the stage where you're finding it too hard, or if there's a lack of capacity where that's something that people need support with. Trusts, it can be an incredibly powerful thing for families to be able to set aside money for people who are vulnerable, who are difficult. So we mentioned Big Tom, who's a business owner. What happens if Big Tom gets ill and he's running his business? Who can step in at that point? So these conversations are quite important about looking at planning, looking who could succeed Tom, both temporarily or on a long-term matter. Tax planning, looking at company papers. And the reason I mention this is I was reading the newspaper this week about Michael Schumacher, and that he's got 3 full-time carers at all times managing his affairs. And if you remember, Michael Schumacher, Formula 1 driver, he had a skiing accident, brain injury, entirely an accident. And I think the costs of his care are phenomenal. And as somebody with a considerable amount of wealth, there's quite a lot to be dealing with. So these are things to think about. However, I do understand, and I do appreciate they're a bit hard thinking. They can come across as a bit boring, but they are things that are worth talking about and understanding how they might apply to you and your relatives. Let's have the next slide, please. So this is just some questions that I get asked quite a lot about care. How much do I have to pay? Do I get any help towards my fees? Are there any benefits? Can my spouse be expected to pay for my care? Can somebody continue to live in the family home? what decisions am I allowed to make about my own care and support and how I live and where I live and what I want? And these are all really important questions for people, because we're really interested in promoting and preserving people's autonomy to allow them to make decisions for themselves that work for them, that preserve dignity, that preserve autonomy, but also people rarely come in isolation. So I go back to Big Tom. Big Tom's got a wife and children and a business, and what happens if that incident happens where he's out of action, or he ends up in long-term care because he's had a stroke unexpectedly? Do people know what he wants? Has he had that conversation? And sometimes having the conversation is a huge part of it. It's just starting that dialogue. However, what you often need is behind the scenes, you need that paperwork to back it up. You need to back it up with the power of attorney and any expression of wishes of what is and isn't important to you. Some people draw up what they call living wills or advanced decisions, which is, this is treatment I don't want. If I get to this stage with my health, I don't want any more treatment. So understanding these conversations is really important. And always at this point sort of think about the case of Paul Briggs. And Paul Briggs was ex-army police officer, was going to work one day on his motorbike and got knocked off his motorbike by somebody who just veered across the road. And he was up on the Wirral. He got flew to Walton Hospital, fantastic neurosurgery. They weren't able to, fix him, and he was in a coma. Now, his wife, his daughter, his mother and his sister said he'd hate this. He would hate this life. He'd hate being in a coma. He'd hate this level. He was a very active person. And, even though, it's heartbreaking for us, we don't want him to remain alive. We'd like to withdraw life-sustaining treatment. The care board, the independent care board, the hospital trust at the time said, no, we're not willing to do that, because whilst he is in a coma, he is responding to certain stimuli. So he's responding to changes in light and temperature. So we're not willing to do that. And the crucial part of this conversation is nobody had the legal right to make that decision except for the court. So off goes Mrs. Briggs to court with her support of her family and put her case to the court and said he'd hate this. And she said, we've long had conversations about this. We've sat on the sofa for years. We've talked about it. I know this isn't what he wanted. And the judge says in the judgment, he says, had there been a power of attorney or advanced decision, I wouldn't have needed to be here in court discussing this, because that authority was already there. Now, on this occasion, they did agree with Mrs. Briggs and they did withdraw life-sustaining treatment for Paul. He did die. And Lindsay, his wife, is now a huge campaigner for this work. And I always think of her, and I think of that awful incident, went out the front door, went to work and didn't come home. And not only that, but then the trauma and the difficulties of then having a court case on top of that. So if I have the next slide, please. So this is a little bit of a run through how care fee funding works, because as I say, this is something that people find themselves in the position where care is suddenly thrust upon them, and there's lots of ways of paying for care, and understanding what you can and can't do is quite important. So I think we're all pretty good at understanding we have a free appointed delivery NHS. You get sick, you go to hospital, that's all free. It's an astonishing benefit we have, and long may it continue. Now, I'm a big fan of the NHS. What happens though is that somebody might need to leave hospital, and you can get up to 6 weeks free, what we call reablement, rehabilitation, sometimes called a step-down bed, which is a temporary sort of move to go, you're not in a critical or acute hospital setting. You're in a sort of a halfway house to see how you manage with getting back on your feet. And then let's see what that looks like. That can be a sort of a less acute hospital. That can be care at home with support coming round. But after that 6 weeks, that's withdrawn, and then it's over to you. Which means that if you're at home, you're still paying the costs of your maintenance of the property. So you're still looking at rent, mortgage, heating, utility, gas, food, that's all still got to be paid for. And if you need care and support that is deemed to be social care, which isn't help with dressing or getting around about the house, then that needs to be paid for on top of paying for your own utilities. So it's an extra expense that can often come as a surprise to people, that it's not free. Some people go into care homes, and that can be a residential home, that can be a nursing home. And for some people, that's absolutely the right answer, that going home is just simply not a practical approach or solution. And having that 24-hour wraparound care is better for people. And if we go back to sort of notionally, if you can remember the graph at the beginning, that sort of dip where people have a horrible incident where something happens, and then they go back up that curve, albeit slowly. That can often be the case when people go into care, because they go, thank you. So it's that sort of, you find that people are eating better, they're warm, they're well fed. And I remember speaking to a chap in a care home once, and he said, I wish I'd come in sooner. He said, because my wife died, I was bereft, I wasn't eating, I was lonely, I was struggling with the whole experience. And actually moving into this care facility for him meant that he had 3 hot meals a day, he had loads of company, care and support, and he said it was the best thing that he'd ever done. So it's not all doom and gloom. And he said, I'd rather be paying this service than at home. So my house can be sold, I'm not interested, let it go, I'd rather pay for this. So that sort of increase at the end can be a positive thing for people, where they've had a difficult time, but actually their life is now a lot better. But often that needs to be paid for. So we can go back to the other slide, please. Thank you. The pay or part pay, that's the one that often people are sort of very interested in. So I've said, if you've got care in hospital, it's quite straightforward. It's free at the point of delivery. There is such a thing called NHS continuing healthcare funding, where if care is out in the community, then if the reason that person needs care is their health, then that should in theory be paid for by the NHS. Not easy to get. It does exist. It's one of these things that the conversation needs to be had to understand that it's happening. People who are sectioned under Section 3 of the Mental Health Act are entitled to free aftercare. I had a client once where spouse had been sectioned under Section 3, and my client had come in with 2 letters, identical dates on the letters. One of them said, client's being sectioned under Section 3 Mental Health Act, and the second one said, you have to pay X pounds a week for his care. And I said, well, those 2 cancel each other out. So pretty important that we understand which stream we're in. So a 5-minute conversation with me made her and his life an awful lot easier. So it's understanding that it's there. It's not always appropriate. It's not always easy, and you have to be unwell to receive NHS continuing healthcare funding, but it doesn't mean it's impossible if that's the right approach for that. So it's another thing to just understand it exists and ask, is it appropriate in the circumstances we're talking about? So if I could have the next slide, please. So this is a case that I think is really worthwhile mentioning, because it went all the way to the highest court in the land, which is the Supreme Court. And Elaine MacDonald was a prima ballerina, and she was retired, and she'd had a stroke, and she was living at home, and she was living in Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. But she didn't have enough money to pay for her own care. So in England, if you're not on the funded pathway through the NHS and you're means tested for social care, assets over 23,250, you're paying for your care in full. Below 23,250, you're still paying a contribution, and at 14,250, the state will step in entirely. So Elaine MacDonald was in that bracket of, she had less than 14,250, and and that therefore her care was being paid for by the local authority, Kensington and Chelsea. Now, initially, her care provision provided by the council, which, because they'd done an assessment, what are your care needs, and then how do we meet those care needs? And they'd been having carers around twice a night to help her with her going to the bathroom, toileting needs, and what have you. They then reviewed that and said, okay, well, we can meet your care needs by giving you incontinence pads. And she said, this is wholly undignified, and this is an awful set of circumstances, and I want to pursue this. And I said, my human rights dictate that I should be entitled to better care than that. Unfortunately, as the court says, the cost of providing this personal care would have been prohibitive and would compromise Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea's ability to care for other people. So I think it's really important when we're looking at care fee funding that we understand that there are finite pots, whether that's NHS pots, whether that's local authority pots, and that care might not be the level that one might expect, because the legal obligation, as we discovered in McDonald, is to meet care needs, not necessarily give care at a much higher level that one might expect, as Elaine McDonald did. So understanding what met care needs are and what exceeding care needs are is an important part of the toolkit to understand what's important to you. Because if I had a pound for every time somebody said to me, I want to give away my home, I don't want to pay for care, I could probably be retired by now. And my response is always, well, if you do that, what choice have you got? You're really limiting the choices you've got for your own personal independence and dignity. And generally at that point people go, oh, I hadn't really realised that, so I'm not going to try and give away my home because I think I would like to have choice. But it's, it is understandable. It's scary. Why would you wouldn't? It's not something you'd necessarily know. So let's go to the next slide, please. So we talked about NHS continuing healthcare funding. I'm not going to go through this, but in the spirit of sort of having something to go back to and ask questions about and have a dig about with and a play with, this is what NHS continuing healthcare funding looks like. So it has to be more than incidental or ancillary to that which the local authority would provide. So Elaine McDonald's a good example. Her health needs were not such that the NHS needed to look after it, because she just needed a help with sort of getting around the house or wearing incontinence pads. That wasn't considered a health need, and not of a nature the local authority can provide. The local authority was able to supply her with, requirements, that met her needs. However, if you have got somebody who's incredibly unwell and there's a primary reason for the care to be health, then having a conversation about NHS continuing healthcare funding is really important. So you'll see across the bottom of the chart, there are various areas. So it's things like behaviour, mobility, communication, breathing, drug therapies. And then you'll see we have the letters P, S, H, M, L, and N. So P is priority, S is severe, H is high, M is medium, L is low, and N is no needs. Now, if you get a priority, you're straight through. So you can see there's 4 domains, which is what they call them, where if you hit a P, you get NHS funding. If you get 2 severes, again, you get through. If you're in below those 2 levels into the high, medium, and low categories, that's where the negotiations get more difficult, because that's where you have to demonstrate that that person's needs are such that they are driven by health, not social care. And again, I'm very sort of always keen for the conversation to happen. I'm keen for people to have had the knowledge that NHS continuing healthcare exists, have an assessment, and if you're not eligible, then, or your loved one's not eligible, then you've got an opportunity to challenge that decision, or you have a line in the sand and say, okay, well, actually, it's probably a good thing my relative is not that unwell. because they're not that unwell. They just need a bit of care and support to keep up the independence. But it is something that needs to be discussed, it needs to be talked about, and it needs to be offered. And it's then understanding which of the two streams you end up in for funding. So it's health, then it's free at the point of delivery. If it's social care, it is means tested, and it has been ever thus since the introduction of the welfare state post Second World War. So when the NHS came into existence, the welfare state as we know it also came into existence at the same time. So you've always fallen into one of the two streams. This is not new law. It's just we're aging differently. We're better at diagnosing people with illnesses, with learning difficulties, learning disabilities, that has consequences. And understanding which of the two streams you or your loved one falls into can be incredibly helpful to understand what is available to you. And again, going back to Elaine MacDonald, we're talking about choice. She didn't have a choice because she didn't have the ability to pay for it. And she was reliant on the state, and the state said, this is what we'll give you and no more. If she had money, she could have perhaps paid for carers. So it's horses for courses. It's not going to be suitable for everybody, but I think it's one of those sort of being aware of the position. So next slide, please. Very briefly, it's just me reiterating what you need to do to get through the NHS continuing healthcare funding. So again, the purpose of these slides are that they are to be available after the event to have a bit of a look at if that's something that would be helpful to you. So if I can have the next slide, please. So again, as a lawyer, I thought it'd be quite helpful to maybe put a bit of legalese into this. And I would say that there's two really important bits of legislation that have come in the last 20 years. Mental Capacity Act 2005 and the Care Act 2014. The Mental Capacity Act applies across England and Wales. Care Act only applies in England, but there are sister legislation in Wales, but they follow very similar rules. And Mental Capacity Act covers people who've lost capacity. So that could be somebody who's had a severe stroke, had dementia, had a brain injury, has never been able to manage their own affairs. And there's a whole series of scenarios where people can look at that and what can we do? And so the Mental Capacity Act governs people's care and support, what's in their best interests. And best interests is a really important phrase for people to understand. What is that person who can no longer articulate for themselves what's important to them, what's in their best interests. And sometimes there's arguments over that. And I've seen clients, and I act with clients, and they've got very different opinions, and it can be the same. It can be two siblings with very different views about a parent, saying, well, I want this for the parent and I want this for the parent, and I think this is the best interests. But we need to put the person who's ill or incapacitated at the centre of this to make sure that we understand what the best interests are. Now, if you can't agree between yourselves, then it's an application to court. And I'm a big fan of saying, look, if we can sit down and sort it out amongst ourselves, this has to be preferable, because going to court is no fun for anybody. And ultimately, the court will make a decision that is in best interests for the incapacitated person, and neither of you might get what you want. So, but if you are determined to argue it, we can support that, and we can then really look at what is in that person's best interests. The Care Act's useful as well because it allows for the local authorities to complete a care assessment, not only of the person who needs care, but also of their carer. So it's Section 9 and Section 10 of the Care Act, if you want to be technical. And it allows for the local authority to come in, meet the person who needs care, meet any carers they've got, informal, say it's family, giving support, and saying, okay, this is what your care needs are, and this is how we can meet them, and possibly signpost and give access to other things. So again, it's a really useful bit of the toolkit to have the ability to get an assessment, to go, actually, if this person is not very well, or what do they need? And have it in black and white, and have an understanding of what that might look like, and have an understanding of maybe how that illness or what the trajectory is, whether it's possible to care for somebody at home, or whether care in a care home is more appropriate because more staff, more kit. And I've known people, and I had two people I knew, and husband broke his hip, wanted to come home. Husband was 6'7", his wife was 5'2", and trying to manhandle somebody of that size, and they were both in their 80s, incredibly hard. And that was something where their very strongly held wishes and feelings, where both of them wanted him at home, but the reality was it was incredibly difficult to give him a sense of dignity that perhaps you could have had elsewhere. So there were definitely difficult family conversations, difficulties about getting the right care and support in. Also very proud people didn't want to accept external help, and it was understanding what they could tap into and what they were willing to do. So got a few more slides, and then I shall leave you in peace. So if you could go to the next one, please. Again, this is just a case study to just say how I can help. So I had family where the family farm, mother had gone into a care home, two sons farming, so they're very busy, and they'd found it very difficult to understand what to do with mother's care fees. So she'd ratcheted up quite a significant bill for her care fees, £75,000. And they'd asked family, they'd asked friends, they'd gone down the pub, they'd actually gone to their MP. Finally, I got a call, and I said, well, hang on, let's sit down and let's have a proper look at this. Let's have a look at what your situation is, what's happened with mother, what her situation is, and how actually is it right that she's ratcheted up that level of care fees. And the answer was no. Actually, the care fees should have only been £17,000, because that's why we'd so we managed to navigate that. Next slide, please. Again, this is another case where we had two brothers, and they're both farmers, coincidentally, but two brothers, one punched the other one and killed him. And it was incredibly tragic for the family. And I'm not saying this happens all the time, but they were running a business, they were young children, there were an awful lot of things that needed to be dealing with because they were running a family farm, and they had a dairy herd. And so we had one farmer who wasn't allowed within 30 miles of the farm. We had another one who died. We had family that were struggling, and it was going that we just didn't have the right paperwork in place to enable people to just step in really quickly and help fix that. So I think it's one of those ones that I think do have the conversation, the what ifs. It might never happen, but it does, sadly. And then the last slide, please. So I said, what happens when family disagree? Please try and talk it out. Talking is the best thing you can do. Prepared, not scared. Can't stress enough. Mediation can be really helpful. We need to look at what's in somebody's best interests. We need to look at their well-being, the two bits of the Mental Capacity Act and the Care Act. They're really important and lovely bits of law that are intended to put the person who's incapacitated and well at the heart of this and give them the best life. Court of protection is, however, there for those who lack capacity, and the court can make declarations of best interests. And I'm increasingly seeing a lot of these cases come through where we are ending up having these conversations, and we do need to invoke the court to get things moving. And it's a last resort, but it is there, and the court can make decisions and can order local authorities and can order the NHS to do certain things if it's appropriate for the person at the centre of it. So it's there in the toolkit. We'd always try and negotiate first. We'd always try and do things sensibly, but there we are. So that's me. I will happily have these slides circulated. If there's any questions, then please let me know.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Heledd. I learned so much there. And I think, the big message is you want to avoid court, basically. You don't want to be going through this. You want to avoid those difficult conversations later when you should be present with your family. And also it just brings home the fact that we are living in a world, might have an illness or might be very healthy, but literally you could step outside your door and something happen, or that's so tragic about the farmer. Just a frustration or whatever this argument was.
Yeah.
And that's one tragedy, dealing with a major tragedy for the family, and then you've got to deal with everything else. So however it happens, something may happen at any point to one of us or a family or someone we care for. So it is having all these things in place. I really appreciate you also sharing the technicalities of how the CHC, the continuing healthcare, has worked out. I definitely will be looking at those slides again to get my head around it, but also understanding how the bar is so high. For support. And I think someone put in the chat, I can't bring it up because my mouse is frozen, but how their family member was really struggling, and he had Parkinson's and he was peg fed and lost ability to swallow, all of these things, and yet the CHC was declined. So you often think it doesn't matter when these things happen, will be covered, things will be fine, it'll work out. But actually, it's really complicated.
It's really complicated. It's hard, as you say. Life's hard enough anyway, isn't it? We try to juggle all these things, and then suddenly you throw this level of illness in, and then suddenly you're dealing with an awful lot of bureaucracy that you weren't expecting. And I say, I'm not denigrating anybody, but the NHS is incredibly busy and struggling. Local authorities incredibly busy, struggling, and we know that there's not enough money to go around to deal with this. That can have real life impact on people, and knowing what to say and when can be a big part of it.
Absolutely. I was just wondering, what's the most common issue that you come across or people come to you for help for, which you think would have been avoided if they'd put something in place?
I think it's that if something's going to happen, and we hope it doesn't, what's important to you? What do you want? Because everybody's got an opinion, and actually, if you're working in a family where the person is unwell and they've disengaged or they've lost capacity to make those decisions, knowing what they would have wanted gives us an awful lot more to play with and work with, rather than second guessing and then saying, well, we think this is what they wanted. But if you've got that sort of written down, a black book, I don't mind. Put it somewhere sensible. I think it's the British Lions do a really good thing. They do a message in a bottle, and you can stick a sticker on the back door on the basis that if there's an incident, and paramedics are coming in through the front door usually, and they'll take you back out through the front door. And there's a thing that says, go into the fridge, you'll find a bottle, and it will have important people to contact, whether you want to be resuscitated or not. And I think it's a fantastic little initiative, because it makes people think about what's important to them.
Wow. So who does that?
I'm going to check. I think it's the British Lions. It's message in a bottle.
What's the British Lions? Who are they?
British Lions, I think so. They're a charity.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. I thought it was like a rugby group or something. That's something different, isn't it? That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
This might not be your like world or whatever. I don't know what your view is. So I'm thinking about how difficult it is to guarantee the payments and how people afford care. I know this is something that, you know, is in politics and people debate about a lot, but is there a mechanism where you can have insurance so that you can put money aside already?
They
Are there
are.
private insurers that do that?
Yeah, and so, you know, if there are things called annuities, and financial advisors will often talk about those and give advice on those, and you pay a premium that means that care is paid for however long it's needed. So it's not for everybody, because as I say, the premiums are not necessarily that cheap. But if it's an ability to give peace of mind to the family, that can be a useful aspect. So I think it's that understanding, unless you fall into that small category of funded care from the NHS, or you have so little money that the local authority is paying, a large percentage of people will fall into that category where they are paying for care. And understanding what that looks like and how long that might last for is a really important conversation, because we've seen people making payments themselves, putting themselves in financial difficulties by not having the conversation early enough, and say, you know, not knowing what's available to them, what things they can passport, what benefits there are. So I think it's, you know, if care is looming, and I think it has to be. I think you know, I think the statistics are something like, when the state pension first came in 1910s, average life expectancy was 3 years. It's now 30, and
Yeah.
we're living longer, but not necessarily living well longer. So that sort of knowledge piece is, I think, we need to be aware of. Actually, it's down to us to look to ourselves and to our own futures a bit more, perhaps.
Good. I'm glad I asked that question. Thank you for that. You've been wonderful. I really appreciated it. Thank you for sharing your slides. If anyone who actually signed up on the Eventbrite will be sending the slides out, or if you didn't but would like them and have watched this, then just email us. I put that in the chat. But we're going to say goodbye to you for now. But thank you so
No
much for
problem.
joining us, and thank you for your time and
Thank you for
sharing your
having me.
knowledge. Okay, then.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye. So that was Heledd, and we will put in the chat her organisation just for ease, but also we'll be sending information out, as I said. And I'm really, really delighted to be moving on to Lisa McLean, who is will writing and estate planning practitioner at Andor Wills and Estates. And do actually connect with Andor, the organisation. We'll put their website in the chat, because they do so much, and I will try and have their boss, their founder, on here as well, because he's got a fantastic mind about how he also helps people with support needs, and I think it's the independent funding who to actually work out and pay for their care and look into these things. So people who are actually supported to get them to look at how they are preparing for end of life and managing their care. So that's their organisation, but I'm not going to spend too much time introducing. I will just bring Lisa in. Hello, Lisa. How are you today?
Hi there, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yes, not too bad. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's really my pleasure to have you on here today. I know you're going to be talking about a few things and bringing in some stories and some personal experience, just to really ground this conversation in real life reality, I suppose.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing that, and thank you for sharing your story. Just a bit on the technicalities. I can share the slides as I have with Heledd, if that would be easier.
Yep, definitely.
I think I will do that, because it worked out quite nicely. So bear with me a second. I'll just get to the right slide. There we go. Is that you?
Yep, perfect, thank you.
So just give me a shout when you want me to move on, and I'll
Okay.
let you introduce yourself and carry on with your presentation. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Hi everyone, so my name's Lisa McLean and I work at Andor Wills and Estates as a will writing and estate planning practitioner. I also have a sister company, Barrie Bookkeeping and Payroll Solutions, where I'm the corporate appointeeship manager. And today I'm going to focus on the importance of having a will in place, the importance of having a lasting power of attorney in place, and what differences there is between a lasting power of attorney and corporate appointeeship. So I have over 20 years experience of working within the care sector. I worked in care homes with patients with dementia, I've worked out in the community, I've worked in the hospitals as an auxiliary nurse, and eventually, with all my knowledge that I gained over the years, I wanted to do more, and that's what takes me to Andor Wills and Estates and Barrie Bookkeeping. So if we could go to the next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a story about a gentleman called Keith. So Keith was a joiner and an artist, and sadly he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis at the age of 28-year-old, and he had to stop working. His condition was progressive, so he ended up with poor mobility, which led to the development of severe pressure sores. He also experienced multiple episodes of sepsis, unfortunately, which ultimately resulted in his death at the age of 51 in 2018 due to complications from the illness. His family, on one occasion, they have a very fond memory of Keith, where during a delirium assessment, he actually believed that he was born in the 1700s and the underwear was made of bamboo. And this is, they talk a lot about the memories with him, but there was a lot of issues with Keith's care ultimately, and there was no preparation or end of life planning in place. And I'll go on to discuss how this really is an important issue to put things in place. So if we go to the next slide, family members were aware that he clearly lacked capacity. At the time of his death, he didn't have any life insurance in place, he had no funeral plan, and he had no will. And his family at the time weren't really aware of the importance of having all that in place. So that made them unprepared for the responsibility that followed. And they quickly found themselves navigating complex and emotionally draining situations alone. There had been a breakdown in the relationship for about approximately 5 years prior to his death. And in that time, his house became severely hoarded. Unfortunately, it was infested with rats, mice. He was unable to maintain any personal hygiene. He wasn't able to meet his basic needs like eating and drinking. He was a very proud and stubborn man, and he refused to accept any external help from carers, social work departments, and it resulted in the family putting in a cause for concern to social work. His main family member that was trying to care for him was a single parent. They were working 5 jobs within care at the time, and they really were struggling, and they put the adult cause for concern in. And what happened was social work came out and did assessment, and he still refused carers. He was of the opinion that it was the duty of his family to look after him and no one else. And that was when professionals advised that using tough love might be necessary to try and make him aware that maybe he does need help. So the family members temporarily stepped back from providing the care, and this helped Keith recognise that he did need additional support, and he then agreed to carers coming in 4 times a day, which took a lot of strain off his family members. So his family members attended a lot of professional meetings, sometimes within the hospital setting, to try and discuss the fact that they were concerned that he did not have the capacity to make decisions for himself in his best interest. And Keith was very good at putting on an act in front of professionals, so it would appear like he knew and he understood everything, but in fact, the reality was that his family members knew that he didn't have capacity, didn't understand the seriousness of his situation. And the professionals involved in Keith's care advised the family to prepare for the possibility that his condition could have a serious or negative outcome. The family members were told that they should arrange legal matters such as writing a will, setting up a power of attorney, or applying for a guardianship order. But when the family members asked what these steps involved, why they were necessary, where they could go to get help for this, the professionals didn't provide clear explanations or guidance. So when Keith did pass away at the age of 51, they were left with no idea what they should do. The council had given the family members 2 days to clear his house. If we can go to the next slide, please. The council had given him 2 weeks, 2 days to clear his house, and any personal belongings in that house, they were just to take what they needed and leave everything else. And unfortunately, there was a lot of family members that weren't involved with Keith, and they showed up, and there was disputes about belongings. If there was a will in place, there wouldn't have been any conflict. And unfortunately, the family relationships that were there, there was nothing after that. It was a complete breakdown in the relationships that were already there. Could we go to the next slide, please? So beyond the emotional loss, the realities were overwhelming for his loved ones. So they were left to notify companies. They had 2 days to clear his house. They had to deal with debts. They had to deal with banks and find ways to cover funeral costs, all whilst grieving. And the funny thing about this story, and it's quite strange how things work out in life, but for the funeral to go ahead, a deposit had to be made, and a family member had went to the bank to notify them of his death, and because there was no will in place, they couldn't get access to his funds. But one thing that the bank were willing to do was they were willing to pay the funeral director directly any money that was in his bank account, and to the exact penny for the deposit was the exact amount in his bank account. However, it still left the rest of the funeral bill. How were we going to pay that? The family didn't know that there was grants available to help with funeral expenses. They didn't know that they could contact DWP or even Social Security Scotland. And luckily, Keith's brother came over from Canada, and he settled the remaining funeral costs. But it just shows the importance of having a will in place. Could we go to the next slide, please? So the family members who had been distant become involved, and I hear a lot of stories about family members that lose a loved one, and family members just appear out of nowhere because sometimes family can be greedy, or they look to see what they can get, what they want, and it should be a time of unity. But instead, it can cause lasting damage to family relationships, adding conflict and stress to an already painful situation if you do not have a will in place. If we can go to the next slide, please. So this lack of planning for Keith ultimately created confusion, uncertainty, unnecessary hardship at every single stage. Next slide. So this family showed his loved ones, this experience showed his loved ones how crucial it is to have end of life plans, to understand your legal options, to have trusted support in place before it's even needed, and to know where to go when you need guidance. Next slide, please. No family should have to face any confusion, conflict, or any stress at one of the hardest times of their lives when they're grieving a loved one. So instead of his family wanting to feel sad and grieve for years and years and years, they've chose to turn their experience into purpose so that others can be guided, protected, and supported when it matters most. Next slide. So this brings us to the questions, what is a will and why are wills an important document? So a will is a legal document. It ensures that your wishes are honoured after your passing, and it provides peace of mind for your loved ones and for yourself. So who needs a will? That is the big question. Next slide. The answer is everyone. Absolutely everyone should have a will in place. So in England, Wales and Ireland, you can have a will put in place if you're over the age of 18. And in Scotland, if you're over the age of 16, you could put a will in place. And it doesn't matter if you don't have anything. There's a lot of stigma surrounding wills that, oh, I don't have anything to leave, or I'm too young to have a will. That is not a reason not to have a will. Every single person needs a will. Everyone gets, maybe they're working, everyone receives benefits of some sort maybe, and even if you have no savings, you don't own a house, if you have a will in place, it stops a lot of added stress, because any of your personal belongings, they're given to your loved ones. You are appointing someone who's going to make your wishes happen. So a will, it gives people control and clarity and care even after they're gone. It gives you control over all of your assets. Without a will, the law will decide who gets what. Next slide, please. So the law will decide what, without a will, the law will decide who gets what. Those default rules might not reflect your wishes, your family structure, or your values. A will allows you to decide who inherits your property, money, and personal belongings, and what proportions. It also protects the people you care about. So a lot of people have children and they automatically assume that if they don't have a will, that if something happens to them, oh, it's fine, my parents or my grandparents will look after my children. But unless you have a will in place, naming the guardians to care for them, the court might decide who raises them, and that decision will be out with your hands. A will also helps ensure that the vulnerable family members, such as minors or dependents, are provided for properly. A will reduce conflict and confusion. When someone dies without a will, it's called intestate. And if they die without clear instructions being put in place, families are often left guessing. That uncertainty can lead to stress, delays, and even disputes between family members, and it causes a breakdown in relationships. The will provide clarity, and it will help loved ones to understand your intentions and reduce the chances of any disagreements happening. Next slide, please. A will also saves time and money. So having a valid will usually makes the legal process of selling an estate faster and less expensive. Without one, the process can be longer, more complicated and more costly for the people that's left behind. So if you don't have a will and you die intestate, what will happen is that your family members may be left with the financial burden of having to go through probate, applying to the court. So in England it's probate, and up in Scotland it's confirmation. And this can be a lengthy process. An act is ultimately a responsibility and showing that you care for your loved ones. It's not just a legal document, it's a way of looking after your loved ones when you're not able to do it yourself anymore. It's one of the simplest ways to leave behind order instead of uncertainty. So you also have a living will, which is also known as an advance decision. It's a way of setting out your wishes about medical treatment in advance in case there comes a time when you can't communicate or make decisions for yourself. So it's different from a lasting power of attorney. So what is a lasting power of attorney? It's a document through the Office of Public Guardian where you can choose who can make decisions for you, who can pay your bills and make sure your finances are looked after. It decides who speaks for you about medical treatment, how to avoid delays and stress for your family. So if you can't make decisions because of an illness or an accident, people automatically assume that their spouse or a family member will be able to make decisions, and that's not the case. If we go back to Keith's story with the struggle with his capacity, even though he was deemed still to have capacity, when the family didn't believe he had, they were lucky enough in the end, when he was passing away, he had sepsis, and he quite clearly showed confusion from that the GP stepped in and temporarily removed his capacity to allow his family to get him to the hospital for help. And that's not always going to be like that, and that's why it's important to have a lasting power of attorney in place. So instead of appointing someone through a living will to decide for you, it will speak directly to doctors and healthcare professionals. It can say what treatments you would or you wouldn't want. For example, whether you would want a life-sustaining treatment in certain situations. The key point with a living will is that it only comes into effect if you lose mental capacity. For many people, a living will is clarity. It's all about clarity and dignity. It helps take the guesswork out of difficult moments and gives reassurance that your values and preferences, they're going to be respected and you can speak for yourself. I used to think that a lasting power of attorney was only something that you worried about much later in life, that it was something for other people. But the truth is, none of us can predict when we might need one. A lasting power of attorney is really about peace of mind. It's about knowing that if something unexpected happens, like an illness, or say you're in a car accident, even a temporary loss of capacity, the people you trust most can step in and help without any added stress or barriers. Without a lasting power of attorney, even close family members, they can find themselves unable to access your bank account, make care decisions, or act quickly when it really matters. It can be incredibly frustrating and upsetting through already a difficult time. And what I find reassuring about a lasting power of attorney is that it's your voice, it's written down in advance, and you choose who acts for you. You decide what matters to you, and you do it whilst you're calm and you're in control. Having a lasting power of attorney, it isn't about expecting the worst, it's about looking after yourself. It's a small step now that can make a huge difference later on for you and your loved ones. A lot of people think, and they do, I've spoken with a lot of clients that we work with, and a lot of people have come to me and said that they think that lasting power of attorneys are for later in life, but actually it's for anyone over the age of 18 that can put one in place, and it's really about being prepared. It's not about your age, and I can't stress the importance that absolutely everyone out there needs to have a will or a lasting power of attorney in place. Next slide, please. So the question is that a lot of people ask is, who can be your attorney? And that could be anyone, as long as you fully trust them. It could be your partner, a family member, a close friend, or even a professional. Here at Andor Wills and Estates, we also offer to act as your attorney should you not have anyone you fully trust. And I mean, I'll tell you another little story about one of my close family friends, and they automatically assumed that their daughter should be their power of attorney, and they just felt like that was a thing. It had to be a family member and no one else. And they didn't do it because they didn't give her the position as attorney because they fully trusted them. They did it because they felt they were obliged to because she was their daughter. And what happened was, is he quite clearly stated his wish to his family that he never wanted to be put in a care home. And what happened was, he was in an accident and he ended up paralysed from the neck down. He then took unwell, and he was taken into hospital. And although all his other family members believed that he still retained capacity, the daughter that held the power of attorney, she fought with the GP to get her capacity assessment done, and the results from that was that he no longer had capacity. And what she did next caused a lot of conflict between the other family members, because she put her dad in a care home. And 2 weeks later, he passed away in that care home, and she had no contact with him at all whilst he was in the care home. And it's such a sad story, and it just, I need to reiterate the importance that when you choose someone to be your attorney, speak with them, make sure that you do completely, fully trust them to always consider your wishes. And if you don't, perhaps look at a professional who's going to be unbiased, who's going to follow policies and procedures, and you have 100% trust that they are going to follow your wishes. Next slide, please. So in Scotland, you have a continuing power of attorney or a welfare power of attorney. And obviously in England, you have lasting power of attorney, which combines both financial and welfare powers into a document, giving your chosen attorney the authority to act in all these areas. Next slide, please. So going back to Keith McLean, that was actually my dad. The story at the start that I told you, it was myself that went through the heartbreak and the confusion of not knowing who to turn to for guidance. And I wanted to turn my experience into purpose, and that's what we do here at Andor Wills and Estates. Whether it is you're needing guidance or you don't know what to do, what is best for you. Do you need a will? Do you need a lasting power of attorney? We look at best interest decisions, which I'm going to touch on next. Next slide, please. So our sister company, Barrie Bookkeeping and Payroll Solutions, we also offer a service called corporate appointeeship. Next slide. So what is corporate appointeeship? Well, corporate appointeeship is when it's usually undertaken by a local authority, a charity, or a specialist financial management organisation like ourselves, who are authorised by the Department for Work and Pensions, which is DWP, or in Scotland, Social Security Scotland, to act on an individual's behalf in managing their benefits. And there's a lot of things that you do under corporate appointeeship that is similar to a lasting power of attorney. Next slide. So when is a corporate appointeeship used? So you could use a corporate appointeeship when a person is deemed to lack capacity, or if they have a physical or mental disability. You can safeguard a person from financial exploitation by using a corporate appointeeship, or you could use one if there's no one suitable to act as an individual appointee. So what is an individual appointee? Because a lot of people get confused between an individual and a corporate appointee. So an individual appointee is a person that's chosen to act on someone's behalf. This is usually a family member, a close friend, or a trusted individual. They often know the person well, they understand their wishes and their values and their daily needs, and they can make decisions for that person feel more personal and familiar. Individual appointees are often unpaid and they'll act out of care or responsibility, but this role can be emotionally demanding and time consuming, and it can cause conflicts between families, which is why corporate appointeeship is sometimes used instead. So, as I said, a corporate appointee is an organisation or a professional body who will manage a person's benefits, their financial affairs. It's typically used when there's no suitable family or when the situation is quite complex. They will follow formal policies and procedures and will usually charge fees for their service. While a corporate appointee will provide structure, experience and consistency, they may have less personal knowledge of the individual's preferences and day-to-day life, and will therefore work closely with professionals such as social workers, support workers, carers, anyone that's involved with that person, even family members or friends. An individual appointee offers personal knowledge and emotional connection, while a corporate appointee will offer professional oversight and formal systems, and both at the end of the day exist to protect the person's best interests. Each comes with different strengths and limitations though. A corporate appointee also usually holds greater authority than an individual appointee. So jobs that the individual appointee are trying to do, for example, manage bills, might be more difficult for them than a corporate appointee would. And why is that? It's because corporate appointees are recognised, well, they're a recognised organisation or a professional body. They're often able to access more easily and act more quickly information on a person's behalf. For example, it could be dealing with banks, government departments, or service providers without the same level of challenge or delay that an individual appointee will have. In contrast, the individual appointee, they might need to provide additional proof, face more questions, or experience restrictions when trying to carry out the same tasks as the corporate appointee. Next slide, please. So at Barrie Bookkeeping and Payroll Solutions, we offer a wide range of services under corporate appointeeship. The majority of the services we provide are all based around safeguarding an individual. So we can do purchases on a person's behalf. We can do, for example, food shopping if they are housebound, unable to go out. We promote building capital, making sure that they've got savings. We also provide cash drop-offs, which is more for people who is unable to use a prepaid card or a bank card. And one of the big things that we also do is each new person that comes across to us, if they have capacity, we will encourage them to put a will in place and to do a funeral plan. Every client that we're with, we plan, put a plan in place and help them build capital to pay for a funeral plan, because it is so important to prepare for end of life. We also provide debt management services, best interest spending. We have accurate financial records, as we're often audited by DWP, Social Security Scotland, as well as the Office of Public Guardian. A part of the corporate appointeeship, our main focus is we pay people's bills, we manage people's bills, their entitlement, and that includes mortgages now. So it's only been quite recently that banks and building societies will now they'll now recognise a corporate appointeeship and allow us third-party access so that we can pay people's mortgages, because they see that that is basically rent, which is very good. And another big thing that we do is we assist professionals with best interest decisions. Next slide, please. So best interest assessment and corporate appointeeship. In the UK, a best interest assessment is used when someone can't make a specific decision for themselves. It only happens after it's been confirmed that they lack mental capacity. And the focus isn't on what's easiest for professionals or family. It's on what's best for the person. That means looking at their past and present wishes, their values, their beliefs, and listening to the people who know them the best, listening to their family, listening to their friends. And this is where lasting power attorneys and living wills tie in with our corporate appointeeship service. So our corporate appointeeship service is all about best interest decisions. We assist in best interest assessments, and everything kind of ties together when it comes to lasting power attorney or living wills. So if someone has made their wishes clear in advance, it helps best interest decisions to be clearer, quicker, and far more likely to reflect on what that person would have wanted. In the UK, there isn't one single person that will carry out a best interest decision. It could be a doctor or another healthcare professional. when it comes to treatment. It could be a social worker or even a local authority when it comes to care arrangements, or a care provider for day-to-day care provisions. If someone is appointed an attorney through a health and welfare lasting power attorney or a court of protection deputy, they can also make best interest decisions within their authority. Importantly, the decision maker has to consult the people who know the person best, such as family, friends, carers, support workers, and they always aim to make the least restrictive choice. So when I say least restrictive, we offer a wide range of services that a social worker might come contact us, and they might say, I have this scenario and I don't know what is the best route to go down, what is the least restrictive. So although everyone must have a power of attorney in place, some families get worried about putting a lasting power of attorney in place. And one of the least restrictive options that we could do to ease them into that is a corporate appointeeship, so that they could see how it all works, because we do a lot of the same jobs, you have a lot of the same authority. And this is advanced planning really does matter. If someone has clearly set out their wishes through a lasting power of attorney and a living will, it helps ensure decisions reflect what that person would have wanted, and it ties in very, very closely to the best interest assessment. At Andor Wills and Estates and our sister company Barrie Bookkeeping, we work with real people who face real uncertainty, and we help them put practical plans in place that protects their future. We support individuals and families from the first stage of setting up a lasting power of attorney, and we can even act for them, and we help them to make the decision on who they should trust to be their attorney and act on their behalf. Beyond our work goes, well, our work that we do, it goes beyond paperwork. We have real life experience, and we're often involved in best interest decision making, helping to ensure the choices made are the least restrictive and most respectful to the person's wishes and dignity. And we always start with the individual. We look at their values, their history, what matters most to them, and we build decisions around that. We also support professionals such as social workers who are carrying out best interest assessments, and we offer guidance and practical help so the process is more clear, it's person-centred and it's legally sound. At Andor Wills and Estates, we want to make sure at Andor Wills and Estates, we want to make sure that we're on the end of the phone if you're perhaps in my position with my dad, where you don't know who to go to for end of life planning. And I just want to say thank you for listening to me rabbiting on.
Thank you. You've been absolutely fantastic. Getting a bit of echo, so I'm just going to put you on mute for a second. So I've got a couple of questions, and well, first of all, I just thought that was really informative. I learned so much. Reminded me about the living will, and your personal story. That's just such a deep and meaningful thing to share, and I really appreciate you sharing it. And I think, again, it's not what we want to do with this conference is not just hurl a load of legal spiel at people. We wanted to connect what's out there, which can seem really intangible and complicated and a bit of just very, very difficult to navigate, to actually real life stories and connect it to people's experience of who's around them, and that this could happen to any of us, and we will know somebody who we think, my goodness, is really vulnerable to this. So I think you did that perfectly, so I really appreciate you sharing that. And I like the focus on, LPA sometimes seems a little bit formal, but actually the essence of it is that you have your voice listened to when you need it and when you can't speak for yourself. So it's basically just you're time traveling, you're projecting what you want for yourself in the future, like a time capsule. That's how I see these LPAs. You're saying, this is what I would like, and then you can update it as you go through life, as you change. People go through their seasons, but you just plan for if it happens to you. So I think that's an important message that you gave, and I just wanted to just check. The difference you explained it perfectly. I did have a question about the corporate appointeeship and the individual appointeeship, but I wasn't that aware of a corporate appointeeship myself, and I think it was really helpful that you explained that to people, and it'd be good to know in terms of, obviously, people can get engaged with somebody now. How do you pay for that? Do you pay a one-off fee, or does it come out of the estate, or how do you administer that?
So in our corporate appointeeship service, there is a fee, but it is dependent on the person's affordability. So we might get a referral over where the person's going to self-fund and they have savings to be able to make a one-off cost for the year. A lot of the times, a lot of our clients can't afford it, and it's actually the local authority that will put funding in place to pay for it. So it really is, it depends on each individual situation. Some people can afford to pay it on a monthly basis, an annual basis. We might be able to apply for funding on their behalf if they can't afford it. It really just depends. Once we are up and running, we've been appointed by GWP, we will look at their income in, their outgoing, their expenditure, and then make that decision on how they can afford the fee.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And in your work, I asked Heledd a similar sort of question. What do you feel is the most common issue that comes up when people come to you and ask for advice that you feel would have been avoidable by any of these mechanisms?
So the biggest issue that I find personally when clients approach us, even for just advice, is they don't know what their options are, and there is a lot of stigmas out there surrounding lasting power of attorney and wills. And one of the big one is people approach us and say, I've got nothing to leave, I don't own anything, I don't have much, so I don't need to put things in place for this. But once you actually explain to them the importance and that they actually do, and that they're just listening to a lot of other people's thoughts and opinions that perhaps don't know the importance of it, then I would say that that's probably the biggest thing for us, is trying to make people aware that come to us with your situation and we can make a best interest decision for you. We can advise you on the best route to take. But yeah, it's definitely that one, even with people saying that they're too young, and yeah.
And I think, let's unpick that a little bit, because you've got things like wills, you've got insurances that you would have paid into, or your employer might have paid into, that, if you don't have your spouse down on them, they can be really difficult. They can't claim those insurances when you pass. You've got, you might not even be married to that person, but be in a relationship, but want to leave it to them, but the insurance is really clear that you need to name that person, or if you're not married to them. So it can be really complicated. So just having all of that laid out and having it all planned and saying, what do I need to do? Because when you can't do it after the fact. So yeah, I definitely agree. There's never a reason not to do it, even if you don't think you tangibly have anything. There will be things that your family can benefit from, which you might not even have access to at that point, but they are there for them and to help you. Would you say that's true?
Oh, definitely. There are so many options out there to make sure that you're going to have peace of mind, your family's going to have peace of mind when it does come to the end for you. And especially, I've noticed in a lot of younger generations that they don't think of things like this. And if we can do anything at all to assist in helping people know that, for example, we had one client that didn't realise that there's certain thresholds in place for savings and bonds, and unfortunately, quite sadly, his wife passed away, and that has resulted in us having to apply to the court because it was above the threshold of what he was allowed to keep. So there's a lot of technical things that people don't understand at all. So that's why we like to sit with an individual, hear their backstory, find out all the information, and we'll provide a personal plan tailored to them.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And I, again, think it's really enlightening the way that you have so many things that you can support people with. It's just not, okay, well, here's the will, we can help you with that. But we can, like you just say, you can sit down with people and you can say, right, what really help people to think about everything that they have, all their assets, all the support that's there for them and their family at different stages of this. And we have put in the chat how people can get in touch with you, and we'll share it as well to everyone who's joined today or who's going to watch back later. So thank you so much, Lisa. And
Thank you.
I'm going to move us on to the next part, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So that was Lisa, and that was amazing. I found that very informative. Going back to our agenda, we are going to have a break. We're a couple of minutes over time, and I am going to attempt to share a relaxing yoga video. Hopefully you can hear it and everything in the background. I'll check with my team. But just gone 20 past 12, I'd say. If you come back, and we will be live again, and hopefully you can join us then. So thanks everybody for joining us so far. Don't go anywhere, pause us, or go and have some lunch, go and get a cup of tea, go and check some emails, and then come back to us, and we will be back shortly. See you soon.
Hi, welcome to Senior Shape. Today's workout is a chair yoga. This is a great time to relax, get some good stretching in. As always, you do you. This is not a workout to push yourself. This is a workout to feel better about yourself, relax, and gain some flexibility. I want to make sure that you check your posture first, rolling the shoulders down and back, stacking the spine straight on top. Everything's all lined up together. If you're petite, you may need to put something underneath your feet, maybe like a yoga block, a folded up blanket, to make sure that the knees are in line with your hip. So go ahead and check that for a moment, making sure that the ankles are underneath the knees, and again, that we're all lined up for proper alignment. Once you've got that settled, find your chair, again, preferably with no arms, and let's get started. Go ahead and fold your fingers in your lap, sitting up nice and tall. Close your eyes and start with some deep cleansing breaths. In and out. Again, in. Exhale. One more. Open up those eyelids. We're going to start with a seated cat-cow. Drop the hands to your seat. Tuck your belly button into your spine. Go ahead and round your back, pulling the shoulders forward. And then the opposite, shoulders go back, chest is proud, and pulling slightly back. Again, forward. Exhale, rounding the back, maybe dropping the arms, whatever's comfortable for you. Come back up, shoulders back, proud chest, lift the chin slightly. A few more again, round the back forward. And open, shoulders back. One more, round the back, curving the spine, pull the belly button in. And then proud chest, shoulders back. And then find your way back to center. Bring those palms together and lift them straight up to the ceiling. Nice stretch here, sitting up nice and tall. Turn the palms towards the front, and we're going to bring the elbows out to the side. This is a little cactus position. Let's reach it back up top, palms together. And then nice and slow, using your own resistance here, pull those elbows down and back, feeling those back muscles and the shoulders. Again, lift. Exhale as the elbows come down and back, about a 90-degree angle here. Again, lift, inhale. Exhale, shoulders down and back. One more, inhale, lift up. And exhale, out to the side. We're going to go ahead and cross one elbow over the other into an eagle position, trying to get the palms of your hands together. Feeling a nice stretch in the back of the shoulders and the upper back. Hold that position here. Inhale. Exhale. And now let's lift the elbows an inch or two to deepen that stretch. You're still breathing. Inhale, untwist those arms, reaching back up to the ceiling, coming back down to the cactus position. Bring those elbows together again. This time cross the opposite elbow over the other one. Palms come together again into our little eagle. Inhale here. Exhale, hold. To deepen that stretch, you're going to push those palms harder together. And let's lift the elbows up an inch. Inhale. Exhale. Unwind. And we're coming back all the way up to center. Go ahead and drop that left arm to your chair, reaching that right arm as tall as you can. Inhale here. Exhale, big bend all the way over to the side. Lift up, inhale. Exhale all the way over, same side. Last one, inhale up. And exhale over. Leave that arm up. Let's bring the other arm to join it. And other side. Right arm comes down, holding onto the side of the chair. Really reach that opposite arm up. Big lean over to the side. And lift. Exhale over. Inhale, lift. We have one more. Exhale over. Inhale, lift, bring that right arm back up to center. Now let's alternate. One arm down. Exhale, reach. Inhale, both arms up. Exhale, reach. Two more up. Exhale, reach. Up. Last one. Nice big stretch extension here. Up. And let's bring the palms down to heart center. And release the arms to the side. Twisting over to the other side, nice spinal twist. We're going to put a little pressure with that palm of the hand on the opposite thigh, and then do a big twist around us. Looking back over your shoulder. Inhale here. Exhale, one more, hold in. Exhale, come back to center, other side, big twist around. Opposite hand comes behind us, maybe holding onto the chair for support. Sitting up nice and tall, deep breaths. One more in. And exhale, back to center. We're going to come to the edge of our chair here and then open those feet out. So then, again, the ankles are underneath those knees. Feeling a nice stretch in the inner thigh. Arms are out to the side, palms are facing forward. Reach those fingertips all the way to the side, and of course, sit up nice and tall. And we're going to inhale, and as we exhale, we're going to reach one side all the way towards that ankle while the opposite arm is coming up, and then we're going to look up into that top hand. Inhale. Exhale, let's come back to center, other side. Reaching towards that ankle, palm forward, other arm comes up, and then gaze up towards those fingers to relax the neck. Inhale. Exhale, let's come back to center. Let's do it again. Other side. Reach towards that ankle. Maybe you go a little bit further this time. Keep that core engaged. Pulling the belly button to the spine. Big stretch center. Then reaching down. Looking up towards the finger. You may not come this far. And if it's more comfortable for you, you can always even put a little pressure leaning on that thigh. One more time each side. Reaching down, gazing up at the ceiling. Back out to center. Last time, reach. Come back to center and release it down. Let's go ahead and walk those feet in. I want you to take your right leg and gently hug the knee into the chest. We're still sitting up nice and tall. Try to keep the spine straight or neutral. Nice big hug in here. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. We're going to take this leg. Ankle is going to cross on top of that leg into a figure 4 stretch. Double check that bottom foot, making sure our ankle is lined up underneath the knee. Sitting up nice and tall, we breathe in. Exhale, leaning slightly forward to deepen that stretch. Hold it here. 2 more big deep breaths in. And out. You're just gazing 1 or 2 feet in front of you on the floor to keep the spine in line. Last one, inhale. Exhale, bend slightly forward. Come back up to a seated tall position and lower that leg. Other leg first. We're going to bring that left leg, hugging that knee in, sitting up nice and tall. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale again. As we exhale, crossing that ankle over the other knee. Now, if this is uncomfortable for you, you also have the option to cross the ankle on your opposite ankle. Just making sure that we keep the knee open to the side for that hip stretch. Here we are, sitting nice and tall. Inhale. Exhale, leaning slightly over with a straight or neutral spine. 2 more breaths in. And out. Last one. Exhale, maybe go 1 more inch. Listen to your body. And let's release out of that stretch. Pulling the heels a little closer to you. Still sitting up nice and tall. We're just going to drop the arms to the sides, palms facing in. Inhale, belly button to the spine. As we exhale, we're going to forward fold all the way down, releasing that lower back. Again, just go as low as you're comfortable. Go ahead and interlace those elbows here, holding onto the opposite elbow. Drop the head. Let the head just hang low here. Big inhale. Exhale, release that lower back. Release all that tension. Again, in. Exhale. 1 more time, big deep breath in. Exhale, pull the belly button to the spine and let's slowly roll it up, dropping the hands 1 vertebrae at a time, finishing all the way with those shoulders. Nice job. We're going to do the same.
Hello, welcome back. welcome back. I'm so sorry to have to end that because it was so good and I was enjoying it, and hopefully you saw it and heard it as well. And it's actually quite relaxing. So if anybody's interested in getting the link of where I got that, then I can share it. Just let me know in the comments. That would be very helpful. So I hope you're able to get yourself a cup of tea. I got myself a cup of tea, I got myself a biscuit. And then we are back again talking about some serious stuff, but in a really informative way. And hopefully you'll all be able to take some real good tips away about how to prepare for end of life, and not just for you, but also for people you support and your loved ones. So I'm really, really delighted to move on to another fantastic guest. So we're going to be talking to Janet now, and Janet is going to be, well, she does a lot of things. I'll let her introduce her SHREEVE care services properly, but amongst consultancy, business development, and living care, Janet does a lot in and for the sector. And Janet will be explain different care options, which is going to highlight how people are often not given full information about care choices. And I think a lot of what we do and talk about today is about that lack of understanding, about the fact that there is actually loads of stuff out there and there's loads of support, but if you don't know what's out there, then it's really null and void to you because you won't be accessing it. And also putting an emphasis, including younger people, on end-of-life conversations. So we are really delighted to be joined by Janet. So I'll introduce Janet now. Hello, Janet. How are you today?
Hello, Sophie. Lovely to be here, and thank you for asking me to be on this. I'm so delighted to be here, and all good. Thank you.
Great. So I am going to let you carry on. I believe that you're going to talk us through some of the things. You've got your own sort of talking points there. So I'll let you carry on. But if you want me to come back and we have a bit more of a conversation, just give a shout and I'll come back in. But
absolutely.
Great. I will leave you to it. So over to you, Janet.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really interesting being on this webinar today because Not Scared, the essential conversation about death and dying. I mean, to be quite honest, 20 years ago, that would have been me. If you'd said to me, I would be doing what I do, working in the care sector, advising people about what is actually out there, I would have said, don't be ridiculous, because I started work in the care sector knowing absolutely nothing other than I had no particular medical background. I had quite the opposite, really. I was a teacher. My degree is in Italian, so I'd been teaching Italian. So when I took the job working for a living care company, my first reaction was, I know nothing about care. But over the last 20 years, I have learned so much. And I guess what I have learned has been more from the layman's perspective, actually, and how little information is out there for people when you need or are looking for care. And it's really been quite interesting. I have had my own experience of it. My own mother died 6 years ago, so I was very involved with her, particularly over the last 3 years of her life, looking to see what was available, and above all, her being a very independent person and wanting to remain as independent as possible. She was 93 when she died, so she'd had a jolly good life, which she would readily say herself. And it's interesting, this phrase, end of life, because realistically, she sort of assumed she was at her end of life, which to a certain degree, obviously she was. But in reality, she still had a good quality of life. And I think that's what we need to be thinking about with all of this. Also, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about death. We don't want to talk about dying. And we certainly don't want to talk about any sort of form of illness that we may have to go through at that stage. However, end of life can be at whatever age. And in fact, last night I was actually listening to a podcast about Ed Davey talking about his disabled son and what would happen when they were no longer around to look after him. So I thought it was amazing that he was actually referring to that, because we assume that this just is talking about people when they're elderly. It can be talking about any age, which in fact I think both Lisa and Heledd referred to in their talks. So why are we frightened about it? What are we frightened of? Are we frightened of discussing death? Are we just frightened of the whole process? I don't really know, because everybody is different. But if we don't talk about it, then how do our loved ones know what we would want? And again, there can be divisions within families about end of life, what somebody would want, what somebody would choose to have. And certainly over the years that I've been working in the care sector, I have most definitely found that people have one idea, or one daughter or son might have one idea, another daughter or son will have a completely different idea about what they would want for their parent. And it's perhaps because we don't discuss it, we don't talk about it. We don't actually ever sit there and say, okay, what's going to happen if I die? And this could be any age. A very good friend of mine said this to me fairly recently, because her son died very suddenly last year in his mid-20s. And she said, I suddenly realized we'd never talked about it. We had no idea what he would have wanted. So I think the importance of discussing this whole subject when we have the time to do it, and perhaps it can be discussed in a less stressful way, because people will often say things when the pressure isn't on them to make that decision here and now. So, for example, I am power of attorney for a very, very good friend of mine who is in her late 80s. Now, my friend is very, very clued in about many things. For someone of her age, you would not believe a fraction of what she does. But she knows exactly what she wants, and we've discussed it at length. I know that for as long as possible, she would like to remain in her own home. Why? Well, she loves her home. It's a bungalow, and her garden is a big feature of her life. So if she was to be in a situation where she needed care, she wants a bed in her room where she can look at her garden. So we've discussed that. And I was talking to somebody yesterday, similar scenario. Mum has been sent home from the hospital, and she is desperate to remain in her own home. It's a slightly quirky home. She actually has a tree in the centre of it, because her garden and trees have been a really big part of her life, which to anybody coming in from the outside might think is a bit bizarre, but that is what she wants, and that is really important to her. So I've been really impressed how that particular daughter is doing her utmost to actually ensure that her mother's wishes are respected. So realistically, why don't we talk about it? Why do we never sit down and say, tell you what, guys, let's make a decision as to what I'm going to do when I die, or when I'm unwell, or when I need care? Because we don't like it. We're frightened. If I say that, is that going to mean that I'm going to die tomorrow, sort of thing, which is ridiculous. So I think the talking about what people require, what they want, and I have thought for many, many years, the problem occurs as well because, and that's what's been so good about this webinar, is the involvement in the legal side, the financial side, the powers of attorney, which are all absolutely vital. And we should be working much more together to ensure we do all make that discussion. So when the time comes, people do know what their choices are or what they wish to have. Now, for me, I have thought many times it's all about your quality of life. And if you choose and have thought carefully about what you would want, then you can discuss that in peace and quiet before the time really becomes urgent. So, for example, you might say, well, I want to remain in my own home, which I suspect is what most people want to do for as long as possible. But what happens if I can't? Where do I want to go? And it's really weird, because I think I'm really lucky, because with the advisory side of my business, I'll often go and visit care homes to see whether I would want to go in there, or whether I would recommend that care home to a client. But in reality, it's really interesting, because you go to some and you think, yeah, I'd be really quite happy to go in here. This would be fine, or I like the atmosphere, or whatever it is I like about it. Why don't we actually talk about that much more? Why don't we say, you know, I went and had a look at that care home, really liked it. We don't, because it's not something we want to talk about, but we should be talking about it. And what does that care home offer for me as a person? Does it suit me? And that's part of what I've tried to do with SHREEVE Care Services. So when I have a client come to me, now they may say, I want to be in my own home. Sometimes it's not physically possible. Okay, where do I go? Well, where do you live? Let's have a look at the care homes. Let's have a look at what they offer. Let's have a look at what you as a family would like for your parent, relative, whoever it might be. And let's go and make as an informed choice as we possibly can, without too much pressure, and understanding what that care home offers as opposed to a different care home. So I think the ability to look at it in the same way as we look at anything else is what we should be doing. We shouldn't be frightened about going to look at a care home. We shouldn't be frightened about talking about this. Quite the opposite. Equally, if you're with a family where they have different opinions, so it might be that one person thinks mum should go into a care home, other person thinks no, mum should stay at home, have a logical discussion. Discuss why. Why do you want that to happen? Now, there will be some cases where it doesn't matter. Somebody's made their decision, end of story. They're going to go with whatever they feel. But equally, if we don't sit down and have those discussions and see what the choices out there are, then where do we go? So I'm going to talk about some of my clients that I've had over the years, and the difference in the choices that people made, and also the logic around the way they made those decisions. We had a client when I was working in living care, quite early on, probably about 10 years ago. They came to us at that particular time. Their needs, in fact, the needs of the husband, when he was fine, it was around the wife that we had requirements. And it was very, very small needs. It was more housekeeping with a little bit of personal care. But they were determined to stay where they had been all of their lives. And because of the way we worked with them, yes, that care did increase. Yes, it got to the point where the husband needed care. And yes, it got to the point where both of them needed significant care, which we managed to sort out. And it was with a genuine discussion with the family, with the care provider. Everybody was involved in this discussion. And this enabled, in fact, both husband and wife died where they wanted to die, which was in their own home. And it was able to happen. Now, that might not have been the case, because if someone obviously has lost capacity, their dementia is too difficult to deal with at home, why don't we talk about that? Because if I became to the point where I had lost capacity, I don't want my family stressing out about where I would go. I want to have had that decision, those discussions now, when I can say to them, look, when you think I've lost it or whatever, and I need more help than I can have in my own home, these are my choices. These are where I'd like to go. These are what I could potentially look at. So why don't we do it? Why do we not actually focus in more on this side of things? Another client I had it was absolutely the right decision for them to go into a care home. The family were a long way away. Yes, they could potentially have had a different type of care, but basically it was agreed that the care home was the right decision. They didn't need a nursing home, they needed a care home, but they needed a care home that would still do outings, do lots of different things, because they loved the companionship that this care home actually gave them. And it worked really well. And in fact, she never actually needed a nursing home. She remained in that care home for the end of her life. And it was brilliant. And in fact, the family knew that their mum was being looked after properly. And they had access at all times to the care that she was receiving. So I think it's looking very carefully at what you want, talking about it and discussing, and go visit a care home. These days, care homes are really open to people going and having a look at them. I mean, I've been to one fairly recently, not very far away from where I live. And I was completely blown away by some of the things that were in there. But one of the things that impressed me the most was the fact the garden was beautiful, and the garden was being done by one of the residents. And in fact, she pretty much managed it on her own. I thought she was amazing. And to see that being done and the atmosphere within the home, I thought, yeah, this is what it should be. Now, obviously, there are going to be instances where that isn't appropriate. You might have to go to a hospice. You might have to go to a different sort of set of circumstances based on what your needs are. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, hospices are more than willing to be involved with people, to talk to you about what they do. And I think that is so important. I know at the moment, my daughter won't mind my mentioning this, but a very good friend of hers is very, very seriously ill with cancer. And I was only talking to her yesterday about, there's no two ways about it. This is very much end of life, very, very, very sad situation. But one of the things that my daughter said to me is some of the care that her friend is getting is brilliant. Some of it isn't. And we need to treat people with the right attitude, because if we don't, it just leaves a horrible taste in everybody's mouth. And also that person deserves that respect, deserves that right care, deserves whatever she needs to make her life or end of life as comfortable as possible for both her and her family. And I have actually given my daughter some suggestions about what she could and couldn't do, which is really very much what I do. So some of my clients have come to me with all different sorts of requests. As Sophie very kindly said, yes, I do run different aspects of the business, one of which I've done is a podcast it's called You Care, I Care. And I have particularly talked to people who are going through different aspects of the care sector. One in particular, one of my clients has done several podcasts about the particularly difficult situation that he has had with regards to his wife who has had a brain aneurysm. Again, young people. So it's, as he said to me many times, I never thought I'd be dealing with this. I never thought I'd be having to deal with a fraction of what I'm having to deal with. And he said, and to be honest, we'd never spoken about it. Why would we? I was talking to somebody yesterday, similar scenario, a lady in her 40s who's had a stroke. The care that she is being given, the support that she's been given, I'm trying to help them resolve the problem that they found themselves in, because she's not given the right support around what her needs are. And this is not given out. This information, where do you go? Where do you find out? Where do you find out what care, what choices are available to you? And it's really easy to find ourselves in a situation where, oh, well, you just need to do this. It's not correct. We have a choice. And that's where I set up SHREEVE Care Services, to try and help people with that choice. It's not an easy choice to make. Nobody wants to talk about care. Nobody wants to talk about dying. But if we don't, where do we go with this? When are we going to talk about it? When it's too late? And I do smile, actually, because many times, and it is a difficult conversation to have, particularly with a relative. Much easier if it's a friend, or in my case, if I'm dealing with somebody, I'm the objective person. But when it's you and it's your family, it becomes very, very subjective. So I can remember having a conversation with my mother about where her will was, and she told me it was in a brown box, and I sort of just didn't really want to talk about it. So when she died, I can honestly say my daughter and I went in there. I could not find that brown box. And all I could hear was my mother in my head saying, I knew you weren't listening. And she was probably right, because I didn't. And I have said to both of my daughters where my will is, where everything is, what needs to happen, because otherwise they wouldn't have an idea. And we don't talk about it. So I keep saying all of this because I've experienced it myself. The other side of things with regards to what people want, do they know? Do they know what care is available to them? Do they understand the different care that is available to them? I always remember listening to, in fact, actually, it was at the Care and Support West conference last year when somebody stood up and said, if we ask the NHS, or somebody says to you in the street, what does the NHS do? You can tell them pretty much. If you talk about care and what does care do, they'll sort of look at you, unless they happen to know and have been involved in it. They have no idea. And it's really true. We need to make sure that what we're talking about with care is out there, that it isn't a subject that we'll just sweep under the carpet until such time as we don't really want to talk about it and we have no choice but to actually discuss it. So what is palliative care? Well, most people, again, don't probably even know what it is. But it's not necessarily the end of life. It can go on for a considerable amount of time. I don't know if anybody has watched the recent documentary that Chris Hoy made about him living with cancer, but it's a holistic support. So it can be, there will be treatments, but equally the focus of palliative care is on the quality of life by preventing and obviously alleviating, pain, etc., as much as possible. But there's no reason to say that palliative care can't go on for some time. And basically, it's not just pain relief, it's all the emotional support that you need. And that, for me, goes back to what I said at the beginning. It's the right sort of care that can actually help you with that emotional support. Equally, practical. One of my, the same client I was talking about with the wife with the brain aneurysm, one of the things that he or that his wife was struggling with was a chair. So the chair first came in and I went to see her, and it was absolutely brutally obvious that chair was not suitable for her. She was uncomfortable. She couldn't get out of it properly. Even though it was a chair that would obviously raise and fall, it was wrong. So in the end, he was told, well, that's the only one that's available. In the end, they had to purchase a chair. Now, going back to obviously some of the previous discussions, that's great if you can afford that very expensive chair, but it may be that you can't. It's looking at ways that we can, other ways that we can get help with something like that. But that was just one example where the right chair made such a difference to this lady's life. She is able to get out of the chair on her own, and she looks so much more comfortable. But again, the palliative care isn't just around her needs. It's also support for the family, because people's lives, when you're dealing with someone that requires palliative care, it's huge. Your whole lives change in a nanosecond. And we need to be aware that there is support out there for people dealing with this. Now, end of life care is much more obvious, I suppose, because it is really going to be, although nobody ever knows when that will happen. And in fact, I think, I know I'm referring to some high profile cases, or one or two anyway. I mean, there was a case, it was mentioned yesterday about Esther Ranson, who has been obviously very unwell with lung cancer for a number of years. And obviously, she's actually now said, I'm very much at the end of my life. And there is that point where you know that really is where it goes. But it's also taking someone's wishes when that happens. Again, I am going back to my own situation because I think this is important. When my own mother was taken into hospital, and to be fair, she was pretty good at home until the last 4 weeks of her life. And it's really weird. I knew she wasn't very well the night before she died, and she had a massive heart attack. I rushed down, got there in time. And I had a discussion with the consultant who said, look, she's not going to come out of this. And I knew Mum had had enough. And it's jolly hard to do, to turn around to somebody and accept that your mother, father, whoever it is it's the end. And I'll be honest, I was absolutely petrified of being with my mother when she died. And yet, in a way, it was actually very peaceful. It was emotional. Of course it was. Both of my daughters were there, which was amazing, along with my cousins, who were also being very close to my mum. But when it happened, it was nowhere near as frightening or scary as I thought it would be. Quite the opposite. And I think it's this fear that we just want to get rid of. Now, I was lucky that it was very peaceful in the end. And I know not everyone is in that situation. And that's why, for me, the more information we can get out there, the more help we can give to people facing these scenarios, the better. But we must not take away the importance of discussing it. We mustn't take away the fact that we are not always going to be dealing with somebody who is in their 90s. We might be dealing with someone a lot younger. I cannot imagine, and however much we talk around it, I cannot imagine what it must be like having to deal with a child who is very seriously ill. I genuinely can't. But what I would like to see is we have those conversations around what might be available for them, what support is available for them, because it cannot be underestimated. It cannot be underestimated how important that support is. So it's having a clear plan as well, what matters, what that person would like. If we've discussed it, there's a reasonable chance we'll know what that clear plan is. If we haven't, we won't have a clue. So basically, when you think about it, care can happen probably in 4 different places. At home, which can be daily visits, or if you need care, or obviously it can be living care, or it can be in a care home or a nursing home. And I think that is equally clarifying the difference, that there is a difference between care, and there is a difference between a care home and a nursing home. A nursing home is where you're going to be dealing with much more complex issues. Or in a hospice, which obviously is purely for sort of end of life, or in hospital. And clearly, most of us would probably not prefer to die in hospital. Most of us would prefer to be in one of the other 3, I think, because you're going to get a much better support around that. So equally, quality of life. And even if you're talking about 24 hours, your last 24 hours of quality of life, let's make it what that person would want. Let's focus on that. Let's give them choices, give them suggestions. And in reality, when we are focusing on this, palliative care can begin very early and it can go right through to the end. And we can ensure that that person gets the right support that they will need. So giving up, a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to give up. No, don't give up. We should be ensuring that that person doesn't give up, because they won't give up if we're giving that support around it. But it's not something that people want to talk about, or I can't deal with it. I can't deal with going and seeing them in that situation. Why? Because you're frightened. There's nothing to be frightened of. In fact, if anything, quite the opposite. I personally would not have wanted to have missed being with my mum when she died. It was hard, but I'm glad I was there. Equally, there are so many myths around end of life. It's almost, well, you can only be in a hospice. No, you can't. You can be at home, or you could be in a care home, or you can be in hospital. And then talking about it, if we talk about it, then, you know, it's all going to be a bit grim. No, that's not the case either. So in reality, I would like to sort of make people less scared about this conversation. Because if we have things in place, and that's where this whole webinar is so good, because it's talking about not just the care, not just the financial, not just the wills, not just the powers of attorney, it's talking about the whole picture. And that picture becomes a lot clearer the more information we have. So how can I help? Well, I would help, and that's what I do, is by going out, talking to people, finding out what they want for their care, finding out what their choices are, finding out what they can afford, if they can afford it, if they're a self-funder, if not, where they can go for some help financially, because people don't know that. Equally, I will say to them, if I think this would work or that would work, better for them. If I feel that they would be better in a care home, I have no problem. I have absolutely no problem referring them to a good care home. I will give them advice around which ones to choose. I will refer them to care providers that I know I would choose, because if I would choose them for me, then I would choose them for anybody else. And the same thing with any type of care, any support. It's all about, if I would want it, if I'm content with it, then surely you would be content with that as well. I'm always happy to talk to different aspects of people when they're looking for care. I'm always happy to hear from people who've actually worked with a provider that's worked really well. I have a client at the moment who is looking for new care in an area that I actually didn't know about. Sorry, an area of the country that I didn't know about. She's actually recommended a provider that I have never come across before. And I'm doing some research around it, which is really interesting. So there we go.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure we had some time for a little bit of follow-up, but that was excellent, and I learned again so much. I really like the way that you taking away the sort of gloom and doom about it and thinking, well, actually, maybe we should just go and visit a care home. Maybe, you know, the Montgomery court case where it was really discussed around informed care and giving people the information that they need in order to have informed care. I think that sort of ethos comes to mind. If you are looking at care homes before you actually need them, you say, even if it's not that one, it might be, this is the kind of thing that I want. It's actually quite empowering. It's taking away doing it when you're already feeling sad and maybe depressed and as everything's so stressful. Everything you're saying, I actually know what this person wants. And anyone who knows me, my children will say, yeah, absolutely, Mum, you're very bossy. And I actually quite like the idea of having it all written down, say, no, this is what I want. This is the kind of thing that I like. I don't want to be cared for at home. I want to be in a hospice, or whatever my choices might be. And then I know that they know, and they might want to talk about it, but then they can forget about it. And then you can let life take its course, enjoy it. And when it comes to a time when you need to dip into those plans, you can do. So yeah, taking it away from being depressing and sad to actually empowering for everyone. I thought that was really helpful takeaway I had. And also, we've mentioned about your podcast, which I'm looking forward to tuning into as well. You Care, I Care. We've put that in the chat for anyone who wants to look at. And I thought also, just thinking about that end of life journey, and thank you for being so open about how you felt about looking back after your mother and the kind of resistance that you had. And sometimes people are genuinely want to avoid that, and you might have family members where one son might be very good at that, and maybe another son or daughter might not be, and you work that out. But actually allowing people to understand sometimes the thought of it is worse than actually being there and having that moment with them. But each to their own. And I wonder, when you do go in and you have been asked to support a family where the care isn't quite right in a care home or how they're being treated, where does the problem, maybe it's just a variety of reasons, but where does the problem sometimes lie? Is it with communication, that the family aren't quite sure how to communicate with the caregivers, or is it the care home themselves, or maybe just part of the system? Maybe there's been some issue from someone going from hospital to the care home and the communication hasn't been right. Is there a theme?
Yes, I think so. I think a lot of it is around incorrect information, lack of, this is who you're going to have, this is where you're going to go, there's no choice in the matter, and there's a lack of sometimes explaining to people what their choices really are. And I think that's pretty much across the board. I just always feel that we know that everybody needs to get out of hospital as quickly as possible. It's not the right place for people to be. But the more I work with people, the more I realize that they're not being given adequate information or adequate choices as to who they should go to, rather than just get out of hospital. That's one of the biggest single things.
And from my experience, even with my mum all those years ago, back in 2010, the discharge was horrendous. It was sort of, oh, by the way, she's coming out. And then we got called by the discharge nurse. I think, well, somebody in the hospital overheard the conversation and said, no, hold on, she needs a plan. There was no hospital bed in the house, and she needed one. It was end of life care, and nothing had been discussed with us. And because we were quite green at the time, I was only 25 at the time. I just thought that the hospital doesn't know what they're doing. I need to pull a rabbit out of the hat. But actually, all these things should have been done beforehand, and something had gone wrong their end. And they did apologise when we complained. So when should people engage with you and your advice? Because it sounds like it's really essential and supportive to families.
Well, I would like to feel that sometimes I'm always happy to do an initial chat if they just want to talk about what choices that are out there. But for me, it's more about when somebody is being discharged from hospital, when they're having care, let's have a look at what care would be right for that person. Rather than feeling, or sometimes it's sometimes it can be when they feel that their loved one requires care, they haven't got care, where do they go?
Okay, great. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I'll leave you go to the rest of your afternoon. We've got lots of information in the chat. People can get in touch with you, and hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. Okay.
Take care, Janet.
Thank you. Thanks, Sophie. Bye-bye. Bye.
Great. So that was wonderful. We're going to move straight on to our final speaker for today, and that's Ali Dickinson. So again, I did mention before that we were looking to have an end-of-life doula, and the spirits came through, the guides came through, and we managed to get somebody to speak to us today. And it's a wonderful role. It really is. And I've spoken to Ali before, and I was really intrigued with her role. Like I said, I think it's a role that people don't really know or don't really understand, but it's very much available and out there. And Ali will talk to us about how to access it and how to and what it's all about. So without further ado, I will bring Ali into the conversation. Hello, Ali. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming on. And I feel like it's a wonderful way to almost sum up today and the conversations we've had. We've started off with someone who's quite legalese, and then we've moved on to some of the practical things like wills, and then talked about sort of support people can get when things don't quite go right. And I feel like this end-of-life doula position is just wonderful to explore, because it really is putting the person front and center of their care at that crucial time of life. So yes, I'm really looking forward to getting into a conversation with you. So thank you for joining us. I am just going to ask you the question really about, can you explain what an end-of-life doula actually does, and what kind of support do you provide?
Okay, thank you, Sophie. And almost what you've done today encapsulates the end-of-life doula role, because we heard from Heledd, we heard from Lisa, and from Janet. And I think what you're doing is bringing all this together so that we're all not working in our own little territories, but we're bringing it together. And I think that's very much what an end-of-life doula does. So we're non-medical, but we support people who have had a terminal diagnosis, so right through to their dying, their death, and we're there for people in their close network afterwards. So the sorts of things that we do is we can help people with their advanced plan for end of life. So there's been a lot of talk about that today, but bringing together all the aspects of that, a lasting power of attorney, a will, making sure that they've got an advanced decision to refuse treatment, understanding how they want to be cared for, where they want to be cared for, etc. We can do hands-on personal care. Some of us do that, so I can be involved in that. We can do very, very mundane tasks like sticking the vacuum round, so we can be practical care, walking the dog, preparing meals, as well as perhaps the more emotional aspect, which is just being with the person to listen about their hopes and their fears, really, really listen to them. And then during the stage where they're actually dying, we can be a presence, we can accompany that person, or we can be a support to the close network to step in and step out as we're needed. And then afterwards with grief and bereavement, with funeral arrangements. So it may be that we're doing all those aspects with an individual, or we may be called at the very, very last moment. So we may be there just for the final days. So it really varies.
Brilliant. That's such a good explanation. And because, I've been in touch with birth doulas. So when I heard end of life doulas, I was like, oh, what's the difference? And how do you help people? And it's a much more involved role than birth doulas. Birthing doulas, I do feel like they're there mainly for the main event when it happens, and a bit of the prep as well. But you're there much more involved, almost doing a little bit of caring as well. So it's an amazing role, actually. Fantastic. I'd love to talk to people a bit about your journey and how you got involved in the end-of-life doula work.
Yeah. I said before, Sophie, I was a HR director working in big corporate organisations. And I can honestly say that when an end-of-life doula walks into the room, they're probably more welcome than an HR director is, because when an HR director comes to a team meeting or whatever, it's normally not great news. It could be redundancies, etc., etc. And I think I had two brothers and my parents. All of them had long dying. This was before I was an end-of-life doula. So I witnessed very much what went really well, what was good, and what was not very good at all. I'd also say my mother was a role model for me, because she was very, very definite about how she wanted her dying to be, where she wanted to die, who she wanted to care for her. And she had everything absolutely in place as well around her funeral arrangements. So I think she was gearing me up to be an end-of-life doula even before I knew what an end-of-life doula was. So I sort of got fed up with being an HR director. It was quite taxing. It was soul destroying in some ways. And I saw an article in The Guardian about the role of an end-of-life doula, not knowing what it was. And I thought, that's what I really want to do. So I identified reputable training, and then went from there.
So in terms of training, what training do doulas do? And is there like a support network where you can find doulas?
So the training was 21 days in total, face-to-face training, but also you have to do volunteer work in a hospice or a related environment, and portfolio work as well. And then you're out there being mentored by more experienced doulas. So the training is quite rigorous. It takes probably about a year to 18 months to get through all of it. But after the training, I actually set up an organisation called End of Life Doula UK, because there were a lot of us being trained, but we were all out there in different parts of the UK, not joined up in any way. And also, I think what was important was that in some ways we had a light touch regulation going on, because anybody can call themselves an end-of-life doula, a soul midwife, an end-of-life companion. But I think it's really important to know that the people we're supporting are safe. So we're DBS checked, for example, insured, we're mentored, we have continuous professional development. So I set up an organisation called End of Life Doula UK, which has become the lead body for holding doulas. And that's the place you can go to find out where a doula may be near to you.
That's really helpful. And I think what we're going to try and do is to put that in the chat so people can follow up on that if that's something they want to know more about. So you mentioned emotional support, spiritual support, maybe hands-on practical help, advocacy. Is there anything that's not included in the doula role?
Non-medical. Obviously, we would not stray into anything that is rightly in the hands of clinicians. So that's not our sphere. Some of us as well may have come from backgrounds that psychotherapy, for example, or whatever. But we're very clear that that's not the doula role. We're not therapists as well. So I always quite like to say that I've never been asked to do anything that I've said no to. There can be some quite bizarre requests, you know, but we're very, very open to doing anything that's not medical.
And when do you suggest that people should get involved with a end-of-life doula?
So I suppose the ideal is that when somebody has perhaps had a terminal diagnosis, that they are in touch. So, for example, I've been with somebody for 4 years from their initial diagnosis right through to their dying. So I think that people can, for example, perhaps have exploratory conversations about what having an end-of-life doula means, even though they're not actively dying. But I think as soon as possible is great. And it may be that initially we're just doing occasional contact with a person. So it may be seeing them once a month, once every couple of months. But the involvement gets more and more intense as death approaches.
Right. And then if someone's received like a terminal diagnosis, what would early engagement allow you to help them with?
So talking through, you know, sometimes you can be landed with really bad news, and you're told, and then you're left holding that. So to have a conversation with somebody about how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you may be wanting to do in terms of planning for your dying. So I think that's important. We can also accompany people to hospital visits, you know, another pair of ears and eyes as to what is being said because it can be quite hard to take everything in when you're attending hospital appointments or talking about what's happening to you.
Absolutely. And in terms of, so the main thing that struck me about being a doula is the fact that you're there for that person, you've got that advocacy role. And I remember being in hospital, or my mum was in hospital and she was in oncology, and before she came home, and she went to visit her, and she said to me, I've just heard an awful conversation with a family, and it was two sides of the family, and their relative was in the hospital bed, and they were quarreling over, I think, money or something. And I just felt sorry for that lady who was in that hospital bed, because you're there so vulnerable, and you've got these two sides of the family going back and forth about something, and it's just not the time or the place. But this does happen, and of course you might have situations where it might be to do with health or anything of someone's situation. Do you sort of help? How does your role help in that situation? Are you helping bring it back to the person?
Yeah, thanks for that, Sophie, because I didn't really say that we're there for everybody. It's just not whilst the person who's dying is a central focus, there's a lot going on around them, and quite often emotions are very, very heightened, and there can be conflict, there can be disagreements, and yes, we would become involved without being pulled in to those dynamics. And I sort of say almost that you may have a situation where there's a history of not great dynamics in the family, and they're not going to be solved overnight. You're not going to be able to do anything much about them. But I think it's, as a doula, you'd be reminding those people that they don't get another shot at this. That whoever they're alongside, their mother or their father, this is the time for them to step up and do their best, and to put that aside. They can carry on in any way they want after the person's died, but not now.
Absolutely. And it is just that engagement and the support for the family, and just certain things that people might actually tell a doula, which they might struggle to tell family members because they're worried about their sensitivities. So just small things. I remember my mum saying, even if I can't communicate and you have a health question or whatever that you need to discuss, please don't discuss it over me where I'm in earshot, because I won't be able to tell you that I don't want to hear about it. Maybe you're talking to the doctor or something.
Yeah.
But just do all that kind of stuff outside of the room, not in front of me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
certain things.
It's absolutely just keeping the ambience and the surroundings calm and peaceful and undramatic. No dramas.
And what do you do in terms of supporting? Because you kind of corrected me a little bit. It's not just about the person; it's also about their support network, so that you're supporting them to do the best by their relative as well, which is great. Because there are certain things where you could do, but you might not necessarily know is helpful, like keeping someone's lips moistured, or offering fluids at certain times, or not offering fluids or foods at certain times. Are you able to sort of like guide the family or loved ones where you think that might be useful for them to know?
Yeah, I think that really came to light during COVID, where the doula role was slightly different in so much that we couldn't always be physically present. But you would be talking to, say, an adult daughter about caring for her mum. And from behind the scenes, you could provide some guidance about what comfort care could look like. So, as you say, sort of about mouth care, for example, about positioning, etc. And I think that because health and social care services are so overstretched, increasingly we're needing to look after our own in our own community more and more. And these are life skills I think that everybody should have. So there's the end of life doula. We're not professionals, we're not experts. We've just had the training and had some experiences of being alongside death and dying. And I think it's our duty to share that with people in communities so that we can pass those knowledge and experience on. and we do quite a lot of work, or I do quite a lot of workshops about what dying is like and what being alongside somebody who's end of life is like as well. And what
that's really good. So how can people learn more about your workshops?
I do them in Exeter, so I'm in the southwest of England. I've got a Facebook page where I put workshops on there that are happening.
Okay.
I haven't got a link to hand. That's really stupid, isn't it? But
that's fine. We'll find it. And what about? Have you got like a case study of or an example that really demonstrates the impact of having an end-of-life doula? Perhaps.
Thank you, because you gave me the heads up that you might ask me this, and I thought about somebody who may be quite a good person to describe, because I was with her right from the beginning right to the end and afterwards. So and she's always given me permission to talk about her, so I can use her name. And she is a woman called Teresa. And when I first met her, she was in her late 50s. And she came along to a death cafe, because as an end-of-life doula, I host death cafes, which I can explain a bit more about, where people come and talk about death and dying. But she was fit, well, and healthy. She's just curious and wanted to have conversations about death and dying. And after about 6 or 7 months of coming to a death cafe, she revealed that she'd had a diagnosis of breast cancer. But she was incredibly optimistic. She had to have some treatment, but she was very, very optimistic. But she did ask if I could support her to do her plan for end of life. So we worked together on that. So we looked at things like the lasting power of attorney, wills, her advanced decision to refuse treatment, what she wanted for her funeral, and very much around how she wanted to be cared for, where she wanted to be cared for, what was important to her, her likes and her dislikes. So we really spelt that out and did the advanced plan. So that carried on for about a year, and then she became increasingly unwell. And I was visiting her more. And she was beginning to need care at home. So she had somebody coming in the mornings and in the evenings. She was at home with her husband. And then there was an emergency hospital admission for a urinary tract infection. So she got into the hospital system. They sorted out the UTI, but I think it was I've forgotten who it was, but somebody mentioned she got stuck in the hospital system. We couldn't spring her out of it. And there was a lot of conversations around what additional care she needed at home, and continuing healthcare and social care were having discussions about who was going to fund what was going to be in place. So I was able to advocate to just press that on and get some decisions made and get the care that she needed at home, so that she could be at home where she wanted to die. Also, what was interesting, while she was in hospital, she had diabetes, and she was sort of desperate for Karamat bars. And Karamat bars are really hard to find. You know, they sell them in garages normally, but they're quite hard to identify. And the hospital was saying she couldn't have them because she got diabetes. But I was sourcing Karamat bars for her, because she was, you know, she was coming towards the end of life, and that's what she really wanted. So just small things like that. Anyway, she got home. She had care in place. I was filling in some of the gaps in care. And what was really important to her was to attend her son's wedding, and also to orchestrate her last Christmas, which she knew would be her last Christmas. So I was able to help her get to the wedding. So I was almost like a handmaiden in being alongside her to do her nails, do her hair, get her dressed, take her in the wheelchair to the wedding, and then just disappear into the wallpaper while she was at the wedding, keeping an eye on her to see if she was getting tired. So she did that. And also she ordered madly from Waitrose, Sainsbury's and Amazon from her bed to get everything in place for Christmas. So she had the Christmas that she wanted. And then in the new year, she was becoming weaker and weaker and frailer. She was obviously in her last days, and she died at home. She died at home with her husband there and her 2 sons seeing her as well. So that was again. Then afterwards, I gave some support to the husband with his grief as well.
That's just such a beautiful and empowering story. Thank you for sharing it, and thank her, wherever she is in the universe, for allowing us to have listen to that, because it really does show that whole journey. And I think hearing the story is just so emotive, helping her be there at the wedding and everything that you did. And it was really around what she wanted to do. And fancy that. I mean, she's literally so vulnerable at this point, but she's still ordering things for Christmas and getting things done. I mean, that just is a really shows her personality and her grit, and just what a lovely, caring person that she is. So
Amazing.
Wonderful, really, really wonderful. And she does remind me of, women and mothers and aunts that I know in my family who were just like, I'm going to get things done. But it was enabled by the fact that she had met you, and obviously that end of life doula role. And it does really paint a great picture around what that role does, in terms of the emotional support, the practical help that people need, and also bringing everything together, not just for her, but also supporting the family afterwards. So, you're just so much knowledge is in there, a library of knowledge in your mind about how to support people and the complexities of it, I think is amazing. And then the other thing that kind of just come home to me is the fact that when you when you are a relative and you have somebody who's passing, sometimes you lose your own voice when you have medical professionals or you have everybody else that you have to deal with, and something's not quite right with the care or what needs to happen, but you just feel a bit disempowered to do anything about it because of what you're going through, or because you think doctor knows best, and they do, invariably have a lot of skill and knowledge, but it might not quite be the right thing, or someone's missing something. So it's great that you could be there to support her and the family in that, and get her those bars. I don't know what bars they are, caramel bars. Never heard of them.
They're very, very sweet, and they're I think it's an age thing. You're probably too young to know.
What are they called? Caramelt? Caramac. Okay, well, maybe someone could put in the chat a link so I can understand. So I've got a sweet tooth, so I might actually like them. That's amazing. So just a couple of things. The Death Cafe sounds amazing. Obviously, anybody in your area are you still doing those?
Yeah, they happen every couple of months at Exeter Library. Again, they're on my Facebook page.
Perfect.
And then they're followed by a grief support group as well, which I do. Thank you. That was clever.
So, I have help in the background. Thank you, Ella. So that's there, and there's some other links as well in the chat. So I wanted to just ask a practical question before getting on to something else. The funding side of it. So I know obviously people might be thinking, I need to just engage with this, so I can start this journey now and then maybe not do anything about it until I actually need it. How does that work? Are you looking for people to fund what you do? Do people pay as they go? How does that work?
Yeah. So doulas work on in a variety of different ways. So some doulas volunteer, others need to be paid to maintain their lifestyle. So it can really, really vary. End of Life Doula UK as well, I understand, have a small fund for subsidised support. Personally, what I do is that I don't want doulas just to be for people who can afford to pay. Do you know, it should be, I really believe in a perfect world that it should be available to everybody and should be funded by, should be funded centrally, but that's not the situation. So what I do is, if people can afford to pay, that is absolutely great. And they do pay. And that gives me a bit of a safety net, so that if I'm approached by somebody who hasn't got the finances, I can support them. And what I find is people are so incredibly honest about their ability to pay as well. Do you know that some people will pay more, knowing that is sort of paying forward. So yeah, that's how I work, a mix of both.
Wonderful. That's really good to know. And I know that you seem to be doing so many things, and you're just so giving in what you do, and I really appreciate you for that. But what else is coming up for you? What other work are you involved in?
Yeah, thank you again for giving me the space to talk about this, because all through today we've been talking very much about choice and respecting somebody's wishes, and that's a big part of my ethos, is that I believe choice at end of life is so important. So I'm doing something at the moment about raising awareness of something that's called voluntary stop eating and drinking, which is a lawful end of life choice for somebody who may have decided that their life is completed, and they do not want to carry on living with dependency, with frailty, etc. It's a legal choice, and it's been going on for years quietly. You know, it's quite surprising when you say something to somebody, they go, oh, I think my grandmother did that. You know, I think she just stopped eating and drinking. It's different from not eating and drinking as part of normal dying. So what I'm trying to do is raise awareness of this, in terms of people knowing about it as a choice, but also encouraging the medical profession to be alongside this, in so much that there is no national guidance, so that the medical profession feel a little bit vulnerable and a little bit risk averse when they're approached with requests for somebody to die by not eating and drinking. And also overcome some of the myths around it. You know, you may see clickbait headlines. There was a recent case of a woman called Emma Bray, where, you know, the clickbait headlines are, a woman starves herself to death. You know, it's just a little bit dramatic. So that's something I'm working on at the moment, and we've set up a website, and we're just doing public information sessions as well. And I have written this down. The website is Talk VSED, so talkvsed.org.uk, and that we're just putting a lot of information on there. So we're not promoting, we're not persuading, we're just providing very factual information about this as a choice.
And I just think that's another thing that people are just, there's such a lack of awareness about that, and it does give people that autonomy to decide a little bit how and this happens, how this process happens. And maybe they've learned about their condition and they're just like, oh, actually, I don't want it to get that far. I want to have some control over this. And just understanding how that happens, what that might entail, I think is just great. I'm definitely wanting to learn more about it. So I think we'll put some information in as well about that. And yeah, I thank you for your work in doing that. And if people can engage with that, have a look, maybe, you know, spread the word. If that's something that people think are interesting to know, it's no pressure on anyone to do it. It's just spreading awareness.
Choice.
The absolute choice. And like you say, if you have sort of like the doctors or GPs, they're not fully engaged with this for whatever reason, it is very difficult to get this information out there to people. So thank you for sharing that. And how can people get in touch with you if they want to follow up with you, learn more about what you're doing?
Oh wow! Again, my Facebook page, but I give my personal email address out and my telephone number willy-nilly. I probably shouldn't, but
no, you shouldn't. We'll share the Facebook group. People can get, well, we have already, so they can find that, and then people can get in touch with you in that. We've done all of the links and stuff in the chat, so people can get in touch with you that way. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Just to say as well, Sophie, I'm very happy though for people to email me direct. So I'm very happy for my email address to be shared.
Great. And what we'll do is we're going to send out the speaker's contact details with everyone who signed up. We had about 100 people sign up, and I know people are going to listen back later and all that. So yeah, that'll all go shared out. So yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. You've made the end of a session that's could be quite, you know, Debbie Downer type stuff, but actually it feels like to know things means that you're better informed and you're better prepared, and that's what we tried to do today. So ending with this was really fantastic. I feel like I know a lot more. Just knowing that there's more help that people can get is, I mean, that's half the battle really. So thank you so much, Ali.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So there we go. We have come to the end of the conference. I hope everyone has enjoyed. We've had some great speakers talking everything from the legal side of things, will writing, LPAs, advanced decisions, and also coming back to the personal side. How do you get somebody to help you and your family who isn't medical or anything that mainstream, but somebody who could just really focus on your family's individual needs and helping you as things progress. So hopefully you've enjoyed that. Obviously, like and share and all the rest. Anyone who signed up on the Eventbrite will get the slides. And if you want to email us because you want to get the slides anyway, you didn't quite get the Eventbrite, then you can email us, and we'll put our email is in the chat and just down here as well. So just a couple of things if you want to pop in the chat if there are any subjects that you want us to cover going forward. So we're right at the beginning of the year. We've only just got into February, so we've got plenty of time to cover lots of subjects at Co-Produced Care on our live streams. We will be doing some more Zoom-like CPD accredited training. I mentioned at the top of this session that we are going to be doing one on neurodiversity, how to help people in the workplace and people who you manage, and also how to manage neurodiversity in the workplace as someone who's working in different organizations. So we'll be doing that. We're also thinking of doing one for people who work in care, especially managers and directors, around change management. So change management, I think, is probably under explored in care, but we have a hell of a lot of change. So whether it's systems, registered managers, different coming and going, businesses being sold and bought by somebody else, and how is that new change, that new culture coming into the being represented. So we want to kind of touch on that with some experts. But if there is anything else that you think that we should be looking at, any subjects, then do get in touch with us. You can email us, you can send us a message on LinkedIn, and we will try our best to bring people together to get that in front of you and share the knowledge. That's what we're all about at Co-Produced Care. We want to make sure that everything that will help the care sector, everything that supports better knowledge about the care sector is shared on different platforms. So you can help us do that by giving us some giving us some tips. Another thing, I am looking for some advocacy support. So, and support around, spreading the word around what we do, but also having a network that we can bounce back some ideas with. So we've got a newsletter coming out, a masterclass, and just a few other things. And we just want a little bit of a network that we can bounce some ideas off of. And if you email us, then it'd be great for you to join. There aren't going to be very many meetings, probably just a very closed WhatsApp group and a couple of online sessions just to talk through some ideas, maybe once every quarter or so. So do get in touch with us so we can add you to that, and you can help shape what we do and how we deliver it. So without further ado, we will leave you. You can watch this video back if you want to at any point using this same link. So you can do that and share it with your team. And so please do that so we can spread the word about wonderful subjects we've covered today. Okay, thanks everyone. Take care, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Co-Produced Care live stream. Take care.